The story begins with the main character who is sitting in a chair, indignantly capering at her mom. The heroine's mom explains to her that she's obligated to fill in for her brother, named Ordo, at the upcoming Pledge of Allegiance because he has fallen ill. In the story, the Pledge of Allegiance is the event where a young boy of 12 takes an oath in front of everyone to begin his career. In this case, the main character's brother must swear allegiance in front of the emperor or the crowned prince. Remembering all of this, the protagonist looked indignantly at her mother, asking why exactly she had to do this. The red-haired girl covered her ears so she couldn't hear her mother as she tried to explain things to her in a soft way. The girl named Ovetta continued to cover her ears with her palms, not content with the fact that she was born an Ordo twin. The protagonist has a twin brother who looks a lot like her, and so the girl has to replace him at the Pledge of Allegiance. Ovetta's mother clutched her head with a smile, not knowing what to do in such a situation when her daughter doesn't listen to her at all. Then the woman looked at her daughter and said that if she would help Ordo, then she would buy her the long-awaited telescope. The little girl flattened her ears because it was the one she had wanted for a long time. In that case, she should agree. The heroine's mom looked at her daughter and how her mood instantly lifted to a more cheerful one after the words about the telescope. The protagonist looked at her mom and promised her that she would be a perfect replica of her brother at the Pledge of Allegiance. Both the maid and the girl's mother were pleased with Ovetta's agreement, while the protagonist herself looked on happily. After a while, Ovetta was already sitting in a chair, waiting to get her hair cut, thinking about her cherished telescope. One maid was cutting the red-haired heroine's hair, touching her with her hands and saying that she had already finished her work. Afterward, the maid gave Ovetta a mirror to look at herself, asking if she now looked like her brother. The girl touched her new short hair, happy for Ordo's rather long hair. The protagonist continued to look at herself in the mirror while her mother talked to the maid, looking back at her. The maid was telling the aristocrat, mole for the character is not even worth worrying about, since Ovetta and Ordo are almost identical. Her mother also approached Ovetta, telling her not to forget that she was now Ordo, to which Ovetta nodded positively. The conversation between mother and daughter was interrupted by a servant girl nearby, who told the heroine that actually Ordo was looking for her. This made the little protagonist feel uncomfortable, but she was still curious as to what her brother needed. The girl decided to go to Ordo's room, taking the first step to do so and asking the maid why her brother had decided to be sick now. The maid just smiled at Ovette as she continued walking, asking her if Ordo wanted to mess with her. Walking down the hall, Ovetta entered her sick brother's room, while the maid bowed to the aristocrats. The protagonist looked at her brother and realized that even during his illness, he seemed like a teddy bear to her. But the good imaginings of Ordo were shattered when the heroine heard her brother tell her not to let him down tomorrow. The girl responded to this by saying that she wasn't that stupid and he was easy to imitate by just pretending to be a know-it-all. Ordo started coughing heavily, telling his sister not to mock him like that because he was sick right now. Rising up, the heroine's brother told her again not to screw up, to which Ovetta replied that he'd better think about his health. The boy decided to confess to his sister that he considers her stronger than himself, to which Ovetta replied, mole glad that he was able to soberly evaluate her. After the protagonist showed her brother her tongue, telling him to sleep because his main task is to recover. Not a moment later, Ovetta decided to run out of the room, which surprised both Ordo and the maid who was standing there. The protagonist walked merrily down the hallway, humming tunes and telling herself that she felt very relieved. After some time, the protagonist was already riding in a carriage to the appointed place to replace her brother at the feast. Along with Ovetta rode and one servant who ordered her not to run like Ordo and behave very decently at the oath of allegiance. But the heroine kept laughing, telling the servant that she looked so much like her brother that no one would even notice the switch. Looking out the window, the brown-haired servant alerted Ovetta that they had arrived and they would now step out of the carriage. The servant was referring to the large and white castle of an aristocratic family that not only they, but other noble children were approaching. The heroine entered the mansion with the servant. She met the prince, who was informed that the Ordo of the Alphonse family had supposedly arrived. At first it seemed that the prince, looking at Ordo, who was actually Ovetta, himself suspected something wrong. However, he greeted the heroine with a smile as she lied to him about the fact that there was Ordo Alphonse, and she was honored to be here. The protagonist looked at the prince with a smile as she played the role of her brother, making sure no one thought she was Ovetta. The prince looked the protagonist in the eyes, thinking it was Ordo and telling her to take a seat at the party. But as soon as Ovetta closed her eyes and turned slightly, the prince immediately noticed an expressive mole near her eyebrow. He looked at it intently with his golden eyes, memorizing and guessing that most likely something was wrong here. Then the heroine found herself in a festive hall with many guests and tables, thinking about the fact that she needed to sit as far away from everyone as possible. Ovetta as Ordo was already taking a seat at the table, thinking that she also needed to speak little to draw less attention to herself. The festivities immediately began with the prince with a glass in his hands, telling everyone that he was glad to see everyone here. He also, gesturing with his hand, said words that right now he would be starting the meal so as not to stall. All the guests thanked the prince for his kind words, and Ovetta also looked at him with a smile, holding a glass with a drink in her hand. The aristocrat started the meal, and Ovetta, as her brother, also decided to have some potatoes and meat, which she enjoyed. Ovetta looked at the prince surrounded by nobles, realizing that now everyone would be seeking his attention, so he would be busy. For the heroine, this was a good thing. She, with her fork in her mouth, was also glad that her brother's loud friends did not attend the feast. However, her joy over being alone was interrupted when Ovetta decided to be hit on by whoever was sitting next to her. It turned out to be a boy with red eyes who smilingly asked Ovetta if he could even talk, thinking he was Ordo. The protagonist didn't even know what to say to such insolence, so she looked at the brunette who kept his eyes on her. Ovetta as Ordo looked at her interlocutor with suspicion, not understanding what was happening to him. Continuing to play her brother, the heroine said with a smile that she was not a particular fan of conversation. The boy looked at Ovetta in surprise, not understanding why she, as an aristocrat, couldn't keep up a conversation. Ovetta continued to eat her potatoes while the aristocrat looked at her with displeasure, not wanting to get behind her. At one point, he decided to snatch a potato from the heroine's fork, either to get her attention or to do her a favor. When the boy succeeded, he threw a piece of potato into his mouth, looking at Ovetta, who was shocked. The boy shrugged and covered his mouth, saying the potato was unpalatable, and asking the heroine if it wasn't supposed to be delicious. Ovetta, playing her brother, replied that for potatoes to be delicious, you don't have to steal them from someone else's plate and eat them. The boy continued to talk to Ovetta, putting his hands on the table and asking her if he, that is, Ordo, was here just to eat. Ovetta continued to listen to the boy with anger and a smile. He, thinking of her being an Ordo, told her that he looked like a beggar from the street. The boy seemed to truly want to pick on Ovetta because he kept laughing at her with a look on his face. Ovetta herself was trying to smile, but she didn't really have the patience anymore to keep from hitting that bully. As the boy looked at her, the heroine thought about how if it were her, Ordo would definitely start pulling his hair in anger. Glancing at the unpleasant interlocutor, the girl realized that her brother had most likely tried to deal with him under the table. Making the decision to do as Ordo would have done, Ovetta began to tell the boy with a smile that the food was wonderful. She then took a deep breath before taking her revenge on the boor across the table for his behavior. Gaining courage, the girl pushed her companion with her foot with such force that he cried out in pain. The boy even jumped up on the chair while the protagonist herself sat at the table pretending to do nothing. The other young aristocrats immediately looked at the boy, not understanding what was wrong, making him feel very uncomfortable. When all the attention subsided, the boy looked at the heroine with a smile and thought that Ordo, that is, Ovetta, was a prankster. After the feast, the protagonist walked down the stairs past the gentleman and could not stop thinking about that boy. The girl who pretends to be a boy with discontent on her face remembered his behavior, realizing that he was very annoying. The protagonist recalled that he used to trip her when she lay the stairs, wanting to teach her a good lesson. Also, Ovetta could not forget the fact that the same boy had pushed her many times, provoking her to anger while she was talking to someone. But now the protagonist was smiling on the street because now they would all have a soccer match to maintain their relationship. Ovetta looked at that boy with lightning in her eyes, telling herself that she was going to take him down now. As soon as the match started, the heroine immediately ran forward, persuading the prince on the team to teach her rivals a lesson. The black-haired boy did not even expect that the aristocrat, whom he had offended earlier, could easily snatch the ball from him on the move. But he didn't give up, trying to counter Ovetta and thinking that this boy was pretty good at soccer. What was clear to everyone after the first match was that Mr. Ordo had brought his team to victory, and that made the brunette even angrier. Also around was the prince, who told everyone that he sincerely hoped everyone enjoyed their soccer game. As he said goodbye to each guest, he said that one day they would get together again and play another match. The heroine, as Ordo, decided to personally thank the prince, to which he replied to the supposedly young lord that he was glad he enjoyed everything. In order to get closer to the prince, the heroine looked at him and asked to be referred to as you, still pretending to be his brother. The prince agreed to the heroine's words, after which he said goodbye to Ordo, not realizing that it was Oveta. However, Oveta could not leave quietly because someone behind her ordered her to confess who she really was. The heroine continued to play around, telling the brunette that she was Ordo, but the boy didn't believe her, saying that he was already aware of everything. The girl continued to convince her interlocutor of the fact that is Lord Ordo, but he answered her that he does not like it at all. To this, the heroine decided to respond in the same way, asking the young boy who so taught him to rudely communicate with other aristocrats. Oveta as an Ordo poked her finger at him, telling him that just because he's a class above the rest, it doesn't mean he should behave like that. After that, the girl decided to turn around and walk on while the boy himself was in a daze at what he had just been told. After a while, the heroine was already in the carriage and was heading back to her mansion like the other guests at the party. Sitting in the carriage as usual was Oveta's servant, who was the first person to ask her whether everything had gone well and if there was any suspicion. The cheerful girl answered the servant that there was nothing like that and no one even figured her out, so you cannot even worry. In the evening, the protagonist was already in her mansion, over which there were beautiful stars and dark blue sky. On the same day, the heroine's mother decided to give her the promised telescope, from which Oveta was very happy, keeping her eyes on it. The girl was already holding the thing in her hand, listening to her mother's praise for her efforts, but she was also greatly interested in her brother's health. The mother of the protagonist replied with a smile that he was still sick, but he was already better, so there was no need to worry. The woman put her hand on the girl's mother, telling her to go to sleep, to which Oveta readily agreed. Mother and daughter continued talking in the room where there were large and tall windows that offered a view of thousands of stars. The night passed very quickly, after which the blue morning sky over the mansion of the protagonist was again colorful. Oveta wanted to lie on the bed, but she couldn't fall asleep because outside the window she heard a strange noise of people talking. Getting out of bed and wiping her eyes, the first thing the girl did was to ask her maid Ellie what was going on. Carrying the noblewoman's belongings in her hands, Ellie first agreed with Oveta, saying that it was indeed very noisy outside. Glancing at Oveta, Ellie decided to confess to her that one of her friends who was at the party yesterday had come to visit her. The girl gave Ellie a puzzled look, telling her that it couldn't be because Ordo was sick and couldn't have visitors. To this, Ellie replied that fortunately, Ordo's fever had already broken, and he must be talking to his friend somewhere in the house. The protagonist touched her chin and seriously wondered, because she hadn't met any of Ordo's friends yesterday. Ellie was holding out her clothes to the heroine, saying that this friend was the son of Archduke Rehoboam, and he was a very famous person. There was obvious surprise on Oveta's face when Ellie asked her if she happened to meet him yesterday. The reason the heroine was surprised was because the great house of Rehoboam is one of the pillars that keeps peace in the empire. The girl looked away, realizing that the one she met yesterday was not just an aristocrat, but a member of that house. She remembered his face that looked at her and realized that yesterday she had met someone on whose shoulders an entire empire rests. Realizing all this, the protagonist decided not to stand, but to run towards the corridor, to which Ellie was surprised. The maid looked at her in surprise, not understanding why suddenly Oveta decided to run away from her without even getting dressed. The girl ran across the grassy ground, wanting to find the place where her brother had spoken to the Archduke's son and watch them. She ran to one window to peek through it and see the guest she was so excited about. Drops of sweat even dripped from her face as she tried to climb higher to see something in the window. Looking through the window, the girl noticed the same boy she had been rude to yesterday, which made her very surprised. From the hopelessness of the situation, the heroine embarrassingly grabbed her head, which was noticed by a servant who was passing by in the garden. The girl wanted to let out her emotions through screaming, thinking about why on earth had she behaved so recklessly with such an aristocrat yesterday. The heroine's strange behavior was also noticed by the servant, who called out to the girl, but she was frightened and turned around, telling Helen to be quiet. Helen approached the heroine indignantly, asking her what she was doing here, while not even wearing shoes before going outside. Oveta kept whispering to the servant to be quiet, or else the Archduke's son might spot them through the window. That was exactly what happened. The boy looked suspiciously at the window because he heard a strange, unnatural noise coming from there. But the boy decided to pretend as if he didn't see anything, turning away as Oveta ran past the window. He still held the cup in his hand and sat in front of Ordo, asking if he had a sister or brother. To this, the already healthy Ordo replied that he had a relative, after which he asked the Archduke's son what was the big deal. The boy continued to drink his tea, thinking about the fact that Ordo must have a twin, because yesterday he was very different. He thought back to Ordo's past, who had been at the feast and had a birthmark on his face, not realizing how he couldn't have guessed it himself. Ordo was surprised by the nobleman's words when he said that he would need to reappear at the royal castle, and he also wanted to meet his brother. Ordo then decided to give the servant an appropriate gesture, asking him where Oveta was and telling the boy that he would introduce them now. The servant quickly approached the young lord and then began to tell him about Oveta in the presence of the Archduke's son. After a while, Oveta was already standing next to her brother while he told the guest that it was his sister calling her name. The protagonist decided to say hello to the boy modestly and with a smile, but she was actually quite worried. The aristocrat answered the girl that he was Henry Hovem, after which he angrily said that he was very happy to meet her. Oveta decided not to say anything and continued to smile, although in fact Hen himself was very unpleasant to her. Hen even asked Ordo with a smile if he could take a walk with his sister through their beautiful garden before leaving. Ordo continued to be calm, but Oveta was even more worried when Hen insisted on walking with her. For a moment he even looked at his sister, asking her what she had done that the Archduke's son wanted to walk with her. But Henu Oveta replied that they could certainly go for a walk, then pointed out to him with her hand where they should go to do so. On the surface, Oveta was calm, but in reality she wanted to scream in panic because she knew Hen's character. For a while the pair walked around the garden. Oveta led him along the paths, and Hen always followed her heels. However, suddenly he wanted to call out to her, causing the protagonist to stop, about to turn back. While Hen was smiling evilly at the heroine, she told him to maul her not even 5 minutes after he started behaving in a boorish manner. Pointing a finger at the surprised Oveta, the boy also said that he realized that she had a mole under her eyebrow that her brother didn't have. The girl even covered her face with her hands, thinking to herself how she could have forgotten about such a small but important detail. Hen decided to directly ask the heroine if she was in her brother's place yesterday, but Oveta only told him not to tell anyone about it. Coughing a little, Hen decided to ask the evil heroine what would happen if he disobeyed her. Oveta was even more wary when Hen told her that Marquis Arvon would despise Ordo for the rest of his days. Out of anger, the protagonist clenched her hand into a fist because she realizes she only did it because her brother was sick. The girl kept listening to Hen when he said that he wouldn't tell her secret because he was quite rude to her yesterday. The boy then decided to extend his hand to the heroine, looking her in the eye and defiantly wishing her luck. From Hen's smile, Oveta quickly realized the fact that he was now doing her a favor that she had to agree to. Laughing a little, the girl asked him what he wanted in return, to which Hen replied that he only wanted a couple things. Oveta continued to stare at the smiling Hen, realizing that she didn't even need to get involved. Then the protagonist very dubiously and uncertainly uttered words about agreeing to his terms. After that, she wanted to abruptly say goodbye to him with a laugh, to which Hen said that such a goodbye was not friendly at all. However, the protagonist still insisted on her own way, telling Hen to go while he replied that he felt very sorry for Ordo because of such a sister. The girl heard Hen's words and strongly resented his insolence, which was written on her astonished face. A few minutes later, Hen was already leaving for his home in a white carriage, while the heroine waved goodbye to him. On the surface, the girl was sweet and smiling as she waved to Hen's carriage, but in reality she was deeply resentful of that boy's favor. She decided to go to the mansion immediately, hoping that no one here had heard them and thus learned of the terrible secret. All the servants rejoiced at the appearance of Oveta in the mansion, but the girl herself from anger literally cursed Henha, his character. Thus passed a large amount of time, because of which one day over the mansion of the Alphon family, as always, were night stars. The heroine remembers that sometimes met with Hen, but he was always surrounded by a crowd of people who were interested in him. Because he was always looking for her, the girl would hide, sometimes even climbing down a tree to get away from him. Sometimes the main character would read a book in order to hide from him somewhere, so he wouldn't even find her. Oveta constantly looked out from behind the curtain to see something in the window, realizing that for the sake of her brother's future, she would do anything. At the window, she often saw Hen talking to the maid, who answered him that Oveta was supposedly very ill, and that was why she was not coming out. Slamming the book shut, the girl also realized that no matter how difficult it was for her, she was still able to endure it, because all her efforts were just to get into the Imperial Academy, and the heroine was already on her way in a carriage to it. The academy itself turned out to be full of people, from students to teachers, which quite surprised the protagonist. Ordo asked his sister why she was so angry, to which the girl answered him that there was nothing wrong with her, and it would be better if he left her alone. In fact, the heroine was angry at her brother because of Hen. In the depths of her soul, she hoped that she would never see him again. The protagonist was so angry at her brother that she suggested that he should distance himself for a while instead of always walking beside her. The twins continued to talk about walking alone sometimes, until at that time they were noticed by a guy standing nearby. He turned to Ordo and Ovette and realized with admiration that they were twins, then asked them what each one's name was. After the twins gave their names, the guy told them that Ovette was in Group G and Ordo himself was in Group B. The protagonist squinted at the people around her, who were staring at her brother for some reason, as if they were surprised by something about him. The twins walked down the corridor and found their offices. Ovette was the first to tell her brother that they should say goodbye now. They looked at each other to warn them not to do something bad before entering their groups. However, the heroine of the story was not able to admire the office because behind her came someone who called out her name. Just by his voice alone, the protagonist could recognize Hen Rahavam, who stood behind her and looked at her with a sly smile. Ovette herself sighed heavily and unhappily because she realized the fact that they had met each other one more time after all. Hen first told Ovette with a smile that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, to which the girl replied that she didn't even think so. Hen then agreed with Ovette's words, saying that he himself was already starting to worry about the reputation and future of the Ordo. Ovette continued to smile, realizing that he didn't really care about her brother's future because he only wanted her. The children continued to look at each other as if they seemed to be enemies, though in fact they were. Ovette, too, covered her displeasure with emotions of joy and politeness, though she really hated her acquaintance. The boy continued to stare at Ovette in silence, saying nothing to her, which made the heroine feel a little ashamed and awkward. But the awkward moment was destined to be interrupted by someone who entered the office with Hen and the protagonist. This person had blonde hair and a nice smile, and he was praising his new students, saying that they were very talented. Many students were already gathered around the blonde-haired teacher, and Hen and Ovette looked at him while he looked at the paper. The teacher also appeared to have very beautiful eyes, which he used to look at Ovette and Hen, asking them to take their seats. Unlike Hen, the protagonist was already looking at the young teacher as if she had fallen in love with him at first sight. She thought to herself that she seemed to have fallen in love with him while Hen was sitting next to her, and was quite unhappy about it. But also the boy's behavior made Ovette smile, so he often looked at her and laughed quietly. Teacher Corbin was already approaching the heroine, handing her a sheet of paper and saying that they should now choose a topic in which to develop the 5 years. The protagonist became more serious as she looked at the sheet in her hands that the teacher had just given her. The heroine realized that in the academy there are additional lessons that are divided into jurisprudence. That is the science that studies the properties of the state. And the academy also has extra lessons in economics, which she visualized in her head. Ovette realized that most students choose economics to continue the family business, but she wasn't like that. The girl was already signing the right papers with the right words, thinking about the fact that if she had Ordo, she could make a different choice. She even remembered her brother, realizing that he, as the heir to the family, would probably choose economics, so she shouldn't choose that. Meanwhile, Teacher Corbin was telling the students that they could change things at any time, plus he was a legal expert. Ovette was greatly surprised because she realized that it was like a sign from above and she should definitely choose law to study. With these thoughts, the protagonist continued to fill out the paper while she was being watched by Hen, who was sitting next to her. The girl was greatly surprised when she heard him give a sly laugh and say that she had chosen to study law. The boy looked arrogantly at the protagonist, asking her if she was really interested or if she had chosen this industry just for fun. The protagonist didn't bother to answer Hen's questions, but only grudgingly asked him what was wrong with her choice. To this, Hen replied that he had already studied economics and management, so he was now also interested in law like her. Ovette looked at Hen unhappily, asking him if he could stick to his choice instead of repeating after her. And Hen answered her with a smile that he would not let the girl get away from his so easily, so he would choose right on purpose. These words surprised and angered the heroine, who looked at Hen, but she was glad that at least they wouldn't be alone in the classroom. Thinking it over in her head, she presented the sheet to the teacher's hands to see what the heroine had chosen to study. The protagonist was very polite to the teacher who, after reading what she had chosen right, even wished her luck. On a happy note, the heroine walked away from the teacher and was then approached by a serious hen who had also chosen to study law. Corbin recognized Hen and said hello to him, holding a leaf in his hand and asking him if he wanted tutoring. The teacher's words that he was an aristocrat and therefore should study separately from everyone else made the boy look at him in surprise. Suddenly, he remembered the conversation with his dad when he told him that he didn't want to study with tutors, but wanted to go to the academy. After reading that Hen also chose to study law, the teacher rejoiced, to which the boy replied that he was just tired of studying something else. At that moment, the heroine heard the teacher talking to Hen and realized that he had also chosen law like her. She looked at him unhappily because she realized that he had made that choice just to annoy her. Time passed, and the heroine, along with Hen, sat in their seats listening to the teacher's words on the first lesson at the academy. Sometimes Ovetta would stroll down the corridor at recess, but she didn't even realize that Hen also always followed her. This time, the protagonist decided to go out to the garden near the academy, around which many students were walking around. She wanted to quietly read a book near the wall, but even here she was pestered by Hen, who pushed her hard with his hand. The boy looked at Ovetta with the same arrogance, offering to see her tomorrow and holding out his hand to the young lady. The protagonist was a bit startled by this, so she suggested that he just say what he wanted right now. The smiling aristocrat replied that there were many things he wanted to say to her, after which he offered to go to his palace. The strange suggestions from the boy startled Ovetta, so she stood frightened, not knowing what to answer. Ovetta turned away from Hen, suggesting that he only write letters, to which the boy asked her why she was such a tightwad. Looking at the heroine of the story, Hen even told her that with a mind like that, she should study as early as possible. Hen continued talking, praising himself, and telling the heroine that unlike her, he was very smart and grasped information on the fly. The protagonist was very unhappy with Hen's behavior, but continued to remain silent, looking him in the eye. The boy was about to leave, but suddenly Ovetta decided to offer him ethics lessons if he thought he was so smart. The protagonist's words made Hen not just stop, but turn towards her, which he did with his feet. The protagonist noticed his reaction to his words, so she too began to look at him with anger and disdain. In an instant, she felt fear, which made her uncomfortable because she had no way of knowing why she was afraid of Hen. Suddenly, the boy leaned his head against the girl's face, telling her that even if he learned ethics lessons, he would not be polite to her. After a while, Ovetta saw off the annoying boy with a glance because he was leaving for home in a white carriage. She looked at the carriage for a long time because she could not understand what it was and what Hen was trying to accomplish. Wanting revenge on the boy, Ovetta made obscene gestures at him, promising that she would make his life at school horrible. With this strange mood, Ovetta was noticed by her brother, who first asked her what she was doing and then told her to go. The heroine's older brother tiredly told her to stop fooling around and follow him without showing such bad signs. But Ovetta resented it even more, causing her to yell to her brother that she was about to be almost torn from anger and hatred. Ordo continued walking toward his carriage while his disgruntled and angry sister followed him, ordering him to take his time. The next day, the protagonist also continued to study. She opened the book sitting at her desk, looking at the pictures and text. While everyone was quietly sitting in their seats, she too was looking through the book, going to understand at least something of the lesson topic. The girl was very frightened as she continued to read, but still didn't understand or memorize anything. Ovetta anxiously flipped through all the pages of the book, trying to understand how other children learn all this and don't complain. Unable to stand it, she decided to slam the book shut because she didn't understand anything it said. The heroine grabbed her head and began to look at the ordinary book, not understanding how everyone learns it, because she doesn't understand anything at all. At that moment, she decided to turn her head to the side, where not far from her she noticed Hen, who was also sitting at the desk. The boy looked at the heroine with a smirk, as if telling her that he would continue to mock and laugh at her even now. This caused the protagonist to turn her head away, wishing she could no longer see the face of the boy who disgusted her. Ovetta was almost burning with anger because she didn't want to lose to that insolent boy but wanted to teach him a lesson, so she decided to take action. From the very next day, she studied not only in the academy but also at home, scribbling something in a notebook. She always tried to be the first to raise her hand in class to answer any question and test her knowledge. The heroine continued to read and study all the topics in the academy while all the while Hen was secretly watching her. He held a book in his hands but looked at Ovetta, thinking about the fact that she did not give up and began to study, even though the topics are very difficult. On one such school day, the heroine boarded the carriage with her brother as usual to arrive at her palace. Ordo sat right in front of her and did not understand why she continued to read books, even after the lessons at the academy were over. He decided to ask his sister about it, wondering why she was so addicted to books lately. Ovetta didn't even look away from the conversation, continuing to read and briefly answering her brother that she just wanted to study. But one day came a seemingly ordinary morning when the sky was once again clear over the heroine's family's snow-white palace. A bluebird flew into the open window of the protagonist's bedroom and began to sing and chirp to Ovetta, as if wanting to cheer her up. Because the heroine herself was feeling very bad, she was lying in bed and breathing hard, feeling hot and cold at the same time. The girl still decided to get out of bed, thinking that her back was very sore, but also her neck. Ovetta was stopped by the maid, who did not allow her to get up, saying that if she was not feeling well, it was best to stay in bed. The unwell protagonist replied to the maid that she was fine just to avoid missing one lesson at the academy. But soon the girl was visited by her mother, who placed her hand on her lying daughter's forehead and realized that she was very sick. The mother of the protagonist alerted the maid that Ovetta had a high fever and needed to bring a wet towel as soon as possible. The heroine of the story continued to reassure her mother that she was fine, lying in bed and looking at her with a smile. Milady replied to her daughter that she would still miss a couple of classes because she had a fever, but Ovetta said she couldn't do that. With an angry face, the girl understood the fact that she could not skip classes because then she might be assigned to a weaker group. Clutching the blanket on her bed, the girl realized that she just couldn't let this happen because she would lose to Hen. Excited for her daughter, her mother told Ovetta that she would bring her some warm milk, and the heroine replied to her that she would then read a book before bed. After that, the madam left, closing the door behind her, and leaving the protagonist alone in the bedroom with thoughts of study. The girl sighed heavily, looking up and thinking about her illness and what would happen in the future. Imagining herself with her brother, she realized that no one expects her to be the successor of the family because Ordo is very smart. Imagining her brother, she realized that everyone in the family knows that Ordo is smart and sensible, so he would be the one to succeed her. Thinking about how much attention her brother would get, Ovetta still didn't understand what she should do in such a situation. She realized that many aristocrats expect her to marry and continue the Alphonse bloodline. Ovetta knows this for the reason that this is always the case with the girls in her lineage. Every one of them has married. Looking at the book, the girl realized that it was all definitely not hers, and she didn't even have the desire to continue the lineage. Touching the book with her hands, the girl realized that from the very beginning, she was trying to understand what she wanted from her life, so she was looking for answers. And she remembered that back then, her teacher told her about the imperial system of law, and it became interesting to her. She still remembers the book that made her interested in law and its study. That's when she learned that the head of the justice system in the country is the imperial court, which she visualized in her mind. But in addition to this, next to the imperial court, there is always the highest aristocracy in government, which she also imagined. Also, the protagonist realized that most of the ordinary people in the country don't even know their rights and responsibilities. Despite this, the heroine remembers that the pay of justice has always worked with both on equal terms, which was interesting to her. With these thoughts, Ovetta collapsed on her bed, realizing that she had chosen to study law after all, not because of teacher Corbin's handsome face. She imagined herself in the future and promised herself that she would definitely become a fair and intelligent judge. But first, she would have to do well in the examination among her students, and then she would have to pass the exam to join the Ministry of Justice. Holding the book in front of her, Ovetta realized that she was unable to study when she had a cold, but she still had to keep doing it. The girl kept looking at the book and reading it, convincing herself that it was the only way to achieve what she wanted. After a while, she put the book down and fell asleep, because the illness made her feel very tired. A few hours passed, maybe even a day, making the scenery outside the window a little different, gray and dull. The main character with a wet cloth on her forehead opened her eyes, still feeling the weakness and heat that left her body. Ovetta decided to raise herself from the bed, after which she immediately grabbed her head because it started to hurt a lot. However, the silence in her bedroom was interrupted by someone who told an animated Ovetta that he was glad she was finally awake. That person turned out to be Hen, who stood nearby and told her that she certainly needed to study, but not that hard. Also at this moment, a maid peeked into the heroine's bedroom, who decided to warn her that she already had one guest waiting for her. The maid realized that it did not need to be said, because this guest was already in the room of the surprised heroine and looked at the maid. Soon the maid decided to escort Hen out of Oveda's bedroom, telling him that he shouldn't be here. Oveda escorted them out with a look. As soon as the boy left, the protagonist immediately grabbed her head, panicking, not realizing what Hen was doing here. Oveda immediately blushed in shame because she assumed that Hen really thought she was sick because of her studies. Hen himself was already waiting for the protagonist in another room, and soon he noticed her, causing him to raise his red eyes. Walking towards him was Oveda, who had dressed up a bit. Hen seemed to compliment her, saying that now she looked like a human being. But the heroine immediately asked him sternly why he came here, and if he wanted to mock her once again. Hen did not answer in words, but only began to look for something in his briefcase that he wanted to give to Ovette. After a moment, the boy showed the heroine a certain sheet of papers that he held in his hand. These same papers he suddenly held out to Ovette while she didn't realize what they were or why she needed them at all. However, it was as if Hen himself wanted her to take them, causing him to look at her with a mocking, sly smile. Hen explained that he had brought the heroine the outline for today's topics, because he couldn't stand having dumbasses in his entourage. Ovetta was even more angry with Hen, which was evident on her face, which said that she was ready to kill him right now. She decided to slap her hand on the boy's notes and tell him that she didn't need his notes at all because she was doing fine on her own. Glaring at the annoying Hen, Ovetta promised him that she would always act alone, even if she passed out or something. The kids looked at each other for a long time because of the fact that there was still no way Hen could say even a few words to the girl. He finally made a bit of a sad face and said that he didn't think she would be so stupid as to refuse help. The boy's words caused Ovetta only a fake smile, which hid the rage and anger at Hen. Looking at the boy's notes, she still told him that if she needed help, she would think about it. Turning away from Hen, the heroine put a stop to this conversation, proclaiming that she would learn and develop herself. Hen was angry with her too, for he had actually written that outline on purpose, assuming she would keep up with him. The boy clutched his outline with anger, not understanding why it was so hard for Ovetta to accept help, especially regarding her studies. The heroine was already leaving, looking at the floor, but then she heard Hen, who ordered in this case to get the highest score in the exam. The girl looked at Hen again as he continued to tease her, saying that he was about to go to dinner with the prince and could take her with him. The main character only looked at him unhappily and asked when he would stop mentioning their pact. To this, Hen replied that if she got the highest grade in her studies in the semester, he would definitely keep quiet. As he approached the girl, he began to tease her again, telling her that the easiest way to achieve it was simply by begging him on his knees. Hen was already getting up from his seat when the girl told him that the easiest thing for her to do would be to go study instead of standing in front of him and begging for something. The annoying boy never answered Ovette. He staggered towards the exit silently as the heroine looked at him. The protagonist also watched him drive away in his carriage as well, watching from the window of the mansion. After that, Ovetta was about to leave, but suddenly noticed on the table the very outline of Hen, which he had forgotten. The girl reached out her hand to it, not realizing whether he had left it there on purpose or whether he had forgotten it as an unnecessary thing. But the protagonist angrily closed her eyes, realizing that either way it didn't matter to her at all. She clenched her hands into fists, thinking that she would still win their bet, no matter what it cost her. The thing was, the semi-annual exam included questions on etiquette, culture, dance, and defense. Having already collected many books for herself, the heroine remembers that the final grade is based on the results of each of the 4 subjects. Also, while flipping through one of the important books, the heroine did not forget that the exam would include topics about state law as well. The girl remembered her relatives and realized that she should learn etiquette and culture from Ordo and self-defense from Halan. And Ovetta herself diligently began to study the necessary topics in books, so as not to fail the exam and to pass it perfectly. On one such day, the girl was studying the topics in Ordo's books, looking at the text, and not understanding with shock how to learn it all. Ordo was also standing next to her sister with a book, telling her that if it was so difficult, it would be best to just memorize it. Ovetta looked up to her brother, Restido asking him if he would at least call her stupid. Looking at Ovetta, Ordo replied that when she burst into his bedroom with motivation, he sensed her potential, but her training is terrible. Because of all the hassle, the heroine grabbed her head and wished she could be born a stone in her next life, but Ordo ordered her not to cry. In the end, the protagonist only laid her head on the book, realizing that there are many wonderful things in life besides studying. Noticing his sister's mood, Ordo suggested that she move on to the basics of self-defense, and that's when Ovetta looked up and agreed to it. Ordo also noticed his sister's smile as well, which made him smile himself, realizing that she liked the physical activity. With a good mood, the heroine's brother decided to slam the book shut, saying that Hallan would teach her that in that case. The protagonist was even more pleased when she heard that she would get the knowledge she needed from such a good person. Immediately afterward, the girl went looking for Hallan all over the Snow-White Palace, calling his name all over the street. The overjoyed girl was quickly able to find him, then waved her hand as the faithful servant turned to her with a smile. Hallan asked the girl if she had come to him to teach him self-defense, but Oveta then couldn't help but notice how handsome he was. Noticing the heroine's positive attitude, Hallan told her that he was glad she appeared before him in good health. The sweet girl thanked the faithful servant for such words, showing him her kind, childlike smile. After a while, Hallan already began to teach the child self-defense, trying to teach the heroine how to properly hold a large weapon. Soon the girl was already holding a real sword to try and hit a target from a dry dream. The teacher was constantly at the girl's side, telling her all the most important subtleties of working with weapons. At the very end, Oveta realized that she was exhausted, as if she did not even have her own soul and was more like a zombie. The protagonist realized that she was exhausted because even on weekends she was learning all sorts of laws, not resting as she should. Sitting on a chair, the girl once again grabbed her head, not understanding why she agreed to the bet, because she has no time even for rest. With such thoughts, the girl continued to sit at the desk until she was distracted by a bag, which someone threw loudly on the desk. The boar turned out to be Hen, who looked at Oveta and informed her that a quarter of her studies were behind her. Oveta reacted to him calmly, asking if he would continue to pester and tease her day after day. Sitting behind him, Hen already wanted to tease the heroine with talk of dinner with the prince. But Oveta decided to change the subject, saying that he had a nice jacket. In the end, the girl didn't play with Hen, turning her back on him and saying he was a fool. Hen sat at his desk with an equally angry face because he wanted to tease Oveta badly, but it didn't work out. But he wasn't going to get behind her. Hen looked at the heroine of the story as if he noticed something about her. Watching how Oveta was completely focused on the lesson, he thought about how she looked like a squirrel preparing for wintering. What caught the boy's attention more was the main character's hair, which directly glowed with light, luring the bully to touch it. Soon the boy did so. He took one short strand of the protagonist's hair in his palm. Thus he began to touch her hair without even asking permission because he was intensely interested in it. A disgruntled Oveta decided to tell him that she would take revenge for that, but a surprised Hen said that he started touching her unknowingly. And after that, with the words that she was definitely fed up with him already, Oveta slapped Hen's hand, freeing her hair. This simple action caught the boy so much that he covered his flushed face with the palm of his hand. He continued to sit at his desk in embarrassment over Oveta as his face reddened either from her hand or her words. After such a usual lesson for Oveta, she sat in the garden where she had already opened her mouth to try a sandwich. But she was distracted from eating by Ordo, who came up to her and asked her why she still didn't even have any friends if she was sitting alone. Oveta looked at her brother, and Nasa couldn't answer the question as to why she couldn't even meet one student. The thing is that she is constantly haunted by Hen, who scares everyone around her, and because of that, Oveta can't manage to meet anyone even if she is nice. She remembers that everyone would literally pull away from her and say they didn't need anything when Oveta wanted to get acquainted and when Hen was around her. Thinking back on it all, the girl realized that it was only because of Hen that she couldn't even make friends, which was very problematic. Oveta continued eating until her brother asked her for a handkerchief. She held it out to him, also asking what he needed it for. Watching as Ordo already wanted to sit on her handkerchief, the girl realized that he needed it to keep his pants from getting dirty on the grass. However, the heroine continued eating, deciding not to be angry with her brother. At that moment, he notified her that she was going home without him today. The heroine already wanted to ask him why this was so, but her brother sat down next to her and advised her to chew her food first before speaking. After that, Ordo, looking at Oveta, admitted that today he would not go home, but would head to the prince's palace. Here, the protagonist realized with a smile that Hen wasn't lying to her after all when he said many times that he had dinner plans with the prince. Before saying anything, the heroine decided to eat everything in a volley, which surprised her brother, who was looking at her. Oveta decided to get up from the grass, straddling her legs and telling her brother that in that case she would get home on her own. The heroine was about to leave, but was stopped by Ordo, who grabbed her dress with the palm of his hand. He continued to hold Oveta by her dress and looked at her, asking why she was acting so strangely and if she needed a handkerchief. The slightly puzzled protagonist looked at her brother and told him that it was just sitting on him, but Ordo only replied that he knew about it. Ovetta was very displeased. She didn't understand if Ordo wanted her to wait for him while he finished his food. Ordo also looked sweetly at his sister while she wondered if he did it so she wouldn't forget her handkerchief. The situation made the girl remember herself and Ordo as children and realize that Ordo had always reached out to her. Grasping her head, the protagonist of the story still does not understand why she cannot leave him alone. So the girl decided to sit down on the grass without further ado, while Ordo was already pulling out a sandwich in order to eat it. The heroine moved closer to her brother, after which she asked him where his friends were and why he was eating alone. Ordo replied that he was fed up with them. Sometime after talking to her brother, Ovetta returned to the classroom, where it was recess and everyone was talking to each other. The girl wanted to sit quietly at her desk, but then she heard a familiar voice behind her, which called her by name. It was Hen, who immediately asked her if she had left because she supposedly had a stomach ache. The heroine replied that she did. Hen then showed her 3 fingers, saying that he had looked for her in all 3 of the women's restrooms, but had not found her anywhere. Ovetta replied that she had a quick meal and went for a walk, but she was actually amazed that Hen had gone into the women's restrooms. The serious boy then asked her interestedly if she felt better after the walk and meal. Ovetta herself was thinking about her social law class, going to prepare for it, and Hen was quietly asking what he meant. Leaning on his arm, Hen said he wanted to hear from her if she was feeling well, since he knew her stomach was hurting. But the girl turned away from him, thinking about her exams, and replied briefly that she was fine and nothing hurt anymore. Ovetta continued to ignore Hen even when he quietly wished her that she would never get sick again. When she heard him say something, the girl turned around and asked if he had said anything, but Hen only shook his lowered head. Eventually, Ovetta turned back and began to read more in depth while Hen lay on the desk and hid his face in intense embarrassment. Thus, time flew by quickly, and it was time for the exams. In the main character's palace, it was once again the day that brightened the castle. Recently, before the exams, the maid often gave her medicinal tea, which she disliked very much. But also the heroine's poor condition was noticed by Ovetta's father, who at the table immediately asked her why she had lost so much weight lately. The girl was silent, but she knew that everyone in her family could answer this question themselves. It was all the fault of study. Her father and mother continued to stare at the protagonist while Madame asked Ovetta if she had been studying for her exams all night again. In fact, everything was as the parents had assumed. The girl was cramming all the topics next to the open window all night. Gradually, the time passed, and the day of the exam, for which the protagonist was so diligently preparing, came. She was already sitting at her desk in the study room when the teacher Corbin repeated to the children what the exam would consist of, saying that they had 3 hours to complete everything. Corbin was holding a small amount of papers in a folder. He also looked at each child and explained to everyone that at the end of the exam there would be a self-defense practice test to test each student. After he explained everything, Corbin started handing out assignment sheets to each child, which he gave to Ovette as well. The girl nodded to the teacher, thanking him and showing her confidence and eagerness to succeed. Ovetta decided to proceed with the assignments, looking at the sheet with angry eyes. She thinks about the fact that she must not lose in the bet with Hen because she had been preparing for this exam for more than 1 or 3 days. Time passed, and all the students were also diligently trying to answer all the questions and solve all the assignments given to them. There was perfect silence in the classroom so that everyone could concentrate. One of those who was the first to complete all the assignments was a boy sitting not far from Ovetta. He put the assignment sheet and pen on the table because he had already finished his work. That boy was Hen, who leaned back and sighed, touching his neck and thinking that the exam wasn't as difficult for him as he had assumed from the beginning. Hen had definitely been studying just as well all this time as the protagonist. He would have continued to sit boringly at the very last desk in the middle row if he hadn't noticed Ovetta, who was still doing her assignments. What caught the boy's attention was that Ovetta was fixing her short hair. Looking at the girl who was only looking at her assignment sheet, Hen could easily assume that their deal was still on. Ovetta was really only focused on the exam, holding her pencil and thinking hard. Hen continued to stare at the girl, realizing that she had immersed herself in her studies even better and deeper than he had expected. And she was only doing it to teach him a lesson. Hen thought about it while looking at Ovetta with his red eyes. After a while, there was a break in the academy, which the protagonist wanted to use to eat alone. But as she was walking down the corridor, she was suddenly called out by Hen with a box in his hands, causing the heroine to not be thrilled. Hen wasn't about to fall behind the girl. He walked closer to her and asked her with a smile how she did in the exam. The boy sat down at the table with the heroine while she munched on her sandwich and told him that she had just trusted her gut. Hen told her that her instincts would do her no good, also offering to drink the sandwich with bread so she wouldn't choke on it. But the protagonist did not put up with the vile character of the one who was always chasing her. She got up from her chair, telling Hen that his character would not do her any good. The boy asked where she was going to go, to which the girl replied that she wanted to go for a walk, as she was getting stuffy with him. Then Hen also got up from his seat and came closer to the heroine, offering her to go for a walk together. But Ovetta again refused him, arguing that she wanted to be alone, not in the company of an annoying aristocrat. The boy decided to tease Ovetta, smilingly telling her that in that case he would tell her main secret to the prince. The heroine lightningly replied that she was not rejecting him at all, but was only afraid for him not to be late for the exam. As teacher Corbin said, after the written exam and a break, the practical exam came, where the children had to show their skills in self-defense. The protagonist was demonstrating her skills in front of the teacher while having a wooden sword fight with her opponent. And after that, the exams were finally over. All the students happily threw their notebooks and papers up, shouting with joy and realizing that the hardest part was over. All the students rushed to the academy itself because the academy was getting ready to announce the grades of each student. Ovetta was glad that tomorrow would be a day off for everyone, something she had long dreamed of. The girl with short red hair looked at the board with the results of each student, thinking that she had done well with dance and self-defense. What she could say about theory. The main character was sure of the latter for the reason that she always remembered her brother, from whom she had studied for the theory exam. She still remembers his strictness and his words about the need to be more diligent when she stands near the board with the results with a thoughtful look. Besides the girl, there were other students gathered in front of the grading board who were also curious to see their results. They raised their heads, trying to see themselves on the list, and the heroine tried to see something too. Then the protagonist decided to move a little closer to the board to see herself on the list. She walked past the students, apologizing for disturbing their peace and accidentally touching them. Finally, Ovetta got close enough to the scoreboard to see her grades. She couldn't wait to find out just how well she had been studying all this time, so there was already obvious anticipation in her eyes as well. However, what she saw in the results made her very surprised, causing her to look at the grades with a great deal of amazement that she had in no way expected. The emotions of shock were quickly replaced by emotions of joy because the protagonist saw her name on the first place in the list, which means that she is the best in the academy coped with the exam. In addition to her name on the list of the best students, she noticed that on the second place, right after her, was Hen's name, and his score was much lower than Ovetta's, but still high compared to everyone else. The girl couldn't believe that their scores were so different. The protagonist started flipping through her notebook angrily and anxiously, trying to find something in it. She couldn't understand why he was so much worse than her in knowledge, and whether he did it intentionally. With such thoughts, the protagonist decided to leave the hall where the board with the results stood. She walked past the students, wondering if Hen had lost to her on purpose, or if he had actually done poorly in some subject. Ovetta needed answers to all these questions, so she decided to burst into her office where teacher Corbin was sitting. The girl pushed open the doors and called him in order to question him about something. After a while, the protagonist got answers to her questions. She slowly walked out of the teacher's office, tapping her small shoes on the stone floor and opening the door ajar. She then closed the door behind her, still clutching the worksheets in her hand with incomprehensible anger and indignation. There were many students walking around her, but they all paid no attention to the angry Ovetta. Soon the protagonist decided to take quick and wide steps to go somewhere, still showing on her face angry because of Hen and the fact that he might have lost on purpose for her. Or maybe it was just a mistake. She couldn't forget Corbin's teacher's words on the matter, the one she had just gone to see. He greeted her with a smile, interjecting if she seriously wanted to know Hen's results. The teacher was reviewing the assignment sheets Hen had done right in front of Ovetta and telling her that he was probably just wrong, but it was as if the girl didn't believe it, so she asked the teacher to explain what was wrong. That's when the teacher explained to her that Hen had written several identical answers in a block. Remembering these words of the teacher, the girl angrily walked down the hallway, still not believing that Hen could make several mistakes at once. The girl clutched the sheet in her hands angrily because she was incredibly angry about one assumption. She believes that Hen did do it on purpose after all because of their bet, to lose to her on purpose. Ovetta realized that this was a real low blow for her. She walked down the hallway with difficult emotions, realizing that she had never put so much effort anywhere for her victory, but Hen dishonored it all by intentionally losing to her. The protagonist couldn't stand it and entered her empty classroom to find Hen there. The door she opened slowly creaked as the heroine looked around the room for her rival. She didn't have to look long because Hen was sitting at his own desk. He looked surprised at Ovetta, who was already walking towards him, clearly not with good intentions. She wanted to ask him directly why he did this. There were other students entering the classroom then, but Ovetta didn't care. She moved closer to Hen and sternly asked him why he deliberately made mistakes in his work. The boy didn't know what to answer, so he asked her what she meant. That's when the protagonist showed him his own answers to the questions in the exam, which she had been clutching in her hand the whole time. She held them out to the boy, saying that she meant the answers to the assignments. Hen was shocked. Showing all the evidence of anger, the protagonist furiously asked the boy if he thought she wouldn't notice it, since he had written the same answer to several questions as if on purpose. To this, Hen only scratched his head. He hesitantly and shyly replied to the girl that he didn't do it on purpose at all because it was just mistakes. After that, he modestly congratulated the heroine on her first place. But that was no answer for Ovetta. She continued to stare at him angrily, trying to figure out what Hen was up to. She assumed that he really wanted her to believe that she had honestly won first place. Because of the whole situation, the main character lowered her head and started blushing as if she was about to cry. She wanted to disbelieve it and the fact that she had spent a lot of effort to achieve first place, and Hen had decided to nullify her efforts by just giving up the first place. Hen also continued to stare in amazement at the girl who was angry with him. He stared at her in amazement while she was already telling him to confess to the prince and tell him the fact that it was her at the Pledge of Allegiance and not Ordo. The girl told Hen even louder to finally tell her secret to the prince so he would stop bullying and teasing her. The girl said she would then deal with the consequences herself, which surprised Hen even more. The students around him were also surprised at the anger of the protagonist. Hen decided to get up from his seat and take Ovetta's hand, telling her to calm down and asking her to talk about it outside. The boy was saying this for the reason that already all the attention of the students in the class was glued to them. But the head Geoinja didn't even want to see Hen anymore. She slapped his palm for the umpteenth time, for which he grabbed her, insinuating that she didn't want to deal with him anymore, and she didn't even think about talking to him. After that, the girl who was angry at Hen told him bluntly that she had nothing to talk to him about. Ovetta was so angry at the annoying boy that she blushed with anger, venting all her frustration on him. Hen places were even frightened by the words of the one who first feared him and now openly rejected him, even more unpleasantly surprised by Ovetta's words that she no longer wanted to see him. When the heroine told Hen all that she had inside, she turned around and walked away from him, making the boy himself unable to even find the words. The other kids were looking at them too, because Hen and Ovetta made a lot of noise in the classroom. The girl decided to calm her outburst of emotions in the calm and cozy library. She sat down at a table next to the books where there were few people, and then put her head down, feeling sad about the whole situation. Soon the protagonist returned home to her home mansion, which as usual had a clear blue sky that illuminated the beautiful patterns on the whitewashed design of the building. Inside the mansion, there was a real celebration because Ovetta's parents had learned that she had won first place among the students in the exam. Because of this, her parents' faces were glowing with happiness, and Ovetta herself was happy about it. Even the maids were happy that their noblewoman had become the best student in her branch. Annie danced with happiness, saying that it was not in vain that she had been giving Ovetta medicine all this time and juicing fruit just for her. The protagonist couldn't help but notice the maid's joy near her. She looked at her, and scratching her head, thanked her sincerely for taking such good care of her all this time. The overjoyed maid decided to envelope the main character in her arms, confessing to her that she was incredible and asking her not to forget about her when she got out in public or went somewhere. Ovetta replied to her that of course she would not forget her and would always be grateful. Because of her happiness, the heroine of the story would walk the corridors and show her exam results to everyone who passed by in her mansion. Each of those who learned that she was the best among the best students was greatly surprised and rejoiced at this. Everyone literally carried the girl in their arms, throwing her up from positive emotions. This was very much like the main character, and she felt that not in vain all this time studied hard for the sake of good grades. Also happy for the protagonist was her own brother, who also returned from the academy after the exams. He looked at his sister and told her that she was, of course, a great girl. Ovetta immediately ran up to him because she knew that her brother was also ranked not the last in the list of top students in his field. She told him that he was a real trickster if he got first place in the exam by substituting self-defense for physics to study. However, the joy of the children did not last long because it was interrupted by one butler and important news. He looked at Ovetta and Ordo and proclaimed that young Mr. Hen Rehovim had arrived at the mansion. The protagonist looked at the servant puzzled. Both Ordo and the protagonist couldn't understand why Hen had such a sudden urge to come to them. They were both making different suspicions in their heads, staring with equal disdain at the corridor where Hen had already appeared. The first thing Hen decided to greet was not Ordo or Ovetta, but their mother, Marquina Alphonse. He kissed her hand politely, as if he were a true gentleman, and then told the woman that he was genuinely pleased to see her. The Marquise was very happy to see such an important guest in the mansion who was very polite to her. Because of this, the mother of the protagonist looked at Hen with a smile, while Ordo and Ovetta whispered about why this bully expressed a desire to come to them. It turns out that the boy only wanted to talk to the Marquise, so he did not greet Ovetta and Ordo, but immediately sat on the couch opposite the mother of the protagonist. First he apologized for his abrupt and unexpected visit, to which the Marquise replied that there was nothing wrong with it. Marquise even explained her words with a smile that Hen is not just an aristocrat for her, but a friend for her children. But Na didn't even realize that Ovetta didn't even think so. As if wanting to get closer to the Marquise, Hen looked at her with a smile and first asked her to communicate with him on a first-name basis, hinting that he wanted to be more than just a respected person to them. Then the Marquise asked Hen what had brought him here, and the boy, showing the Marquise all the confidence in his eyes, told her that he really wanted to invite Ovetta to dinner. At that moment, Hen was such a polite and quiet boy that Ovetta's mother would not even have guessed that he could be an annoying bore. The boy's suggestion surprised the woman so much that she continued to look at Hen with great surprise, covering her open mouth. There was no way she had expected the young aristocrat to come to her with such a request. However, the protagonist was nowhere near as excited as her mother. She was wary and a little angry with Hen because once again she doesn't understand his intentions, which sometimes seems silly and unpredictable to her. But Hen continued speaking to the Marquise with a smile, promising her that he would return from his daughter immediately after the meal, and also for safety. She would be accompanied by a dozen guards and guards. The protagonist continued to look at Hen with disdain. She didn't even think about the fact that he, it turns out, knows what is politeness and etiquette, but next to her, he always behaves as if he was picked up on the street. Meanwhile, the Marquise had already made up her mind. She told Hen that after talking to him like this, she wouldn't even worry about her daughter, after which she told Ovetta to come closer to her with her hand. Hen also looked at Ovetta occasionally. After the protagonist of the story came closer to her mother with obvious displeasure, the Marquise only told her to behave herself, and the maid beside her who bowed to the aristocrat ordered her to immediately prepare ceremonial clothes for Ovetta. The maid then left to run errands, leaving Ovetta, Hen, and the Marquis alone. The heroine of the story wanted to object to her mother by saying that she didn't want to go anywhere, but Hen interrupted her because he really wanted to have dinner with her. The main character looked at Hen, who no longer looked like an obnoxious and annoying boy. He had confidence and politeness on his face, which he chose to show only in the presence of the Marquise. Then the protagonist decided that she would go with him after all. She told her mother about it while making a face as if she was accepting a challenge from Hen that he might be plotting against her. Soon, the protagonist was already in Hen's carriage, where she was riding with him. The two black horses began galloping down the brick road, making distinctive skittering noises as they were driven by the coachman. The carriage drove past a variety of houses and buildings. In the carriage itself, Ovetta kept her unpleasant gaze on the man she hated with all her heart. He, too, looked at her with slight displeasure, as if reading Ovetta's thoughts about how much she disliked spending the evening with him. But the protagonist was also finding a positive side to this walk with dinner. She looked out the window, realizing that because of her constant and diligent studying, she hadn't left the mansion for a long time, visiting only it and the academy. Because of this, literally everything outside the carriage window surprised the little girl. At one point, she looked out the window and was surprised at how many new cafes had opened there recently. The little girl looked at them with admiration and joy. This made Hen smile. A slight but sincere and warm smile appeared on his face, because the positive emotions of the main character were also transferred to him. She was glad to see Ovetta just like that. Soon, Hen's coachman notified the heroes that they had arrived at their destination. The carriage stopped near a tall and whitewashed building, which was a posh restaurant where Hen wanted to have dinner with Ovetta. The inside of the restaurant was also expensive and posh. Ovetta and Hen were greeted by a waiter who immediately bowed low to them before ushering them to a table. Ovetta looked around the interior of the building, which was rich but simple. However, the SE protagonist was greatly surprised by the interior of the restaurant because, to her, it looked quite ordinary and even boring, as if it was an ordinary place. Because of this, there was an emotion of shock and disappointment on her face. Because of this, the girl remembered the way the building looked from the outside. It was neat, clean, and as if it was sparkling, but to Ovetta it wasn't amazing and beautiful because she expected more from Hen if he was an honorable aristocrat. She remembered that when she first walked to this building while Hen was walking behind her, she was clearly not happy with just the look of the restaurant, though Hen was smiling behind her because he thought that Ovetta was enjoying this surprise. But the girl still had nowhere to go. She sat down at a table with Hen, who was talking to the waiter. The guy told them to call him when they had finalized their order. Meanwhile, Ovetta herself was looking around unhappily. Thanks to the fact that the protagonist was always turning her head sideways, she couldn't help but notice the individuals who were sitting in that restaurant. She was also looking at an aristocrat she knew because he was a regular sponsor of her academy. Turning her head the other way, the protagonist noticed one wealthy woman with earrings and blonde hair. She remembered that it was a well-known aristocrat in tight circles that Ellie had told her about. Then Ovetta looked at Hen, who was looking at the restaurant menu, and realized that this place was not for 13-year-olds, as they were now, but for real aristocrats. However, Ovetta decided that since she was here, it would not be superfluous to at least look at the menu of the establishment that the waiter had brought her earlier. She opened the restaurant's food book with a disgruntled face. But what she saw in the book, immediately it surprised her. Her eyes grew wider with surprise because she was greatly struck by the prices in the restaurant, which turned out to be not just high, but inflated to the heavens. Hen couldn't help but notice that his partner's mood changed drastically for the worse when she opened the menu of the aristocratic establishment. He continued to choose dishes, asking Ovetta what was wrong. The girl did not remain silent because she was literally overwhelmed with emotion. She turned the menu towards the boy, trying to show him the prices of common dishes with 3 and even 4 zeros in their prices. Ovetta said that specifically, that didn't satisfy her. What surprised the girl even more was not the prices of the dishes, but Hen's reaction to her displeasure. While she looked at him in shock and surprise as he showed her the prices on the menu, he told her not to worry as he dines here often, and he believes that the chef's dishes would win her over. The boy even looked at the surprised heroine and continued to convince her that she definitely had not eaten anything tastier, and if she tasted the dishes, she would understand why the price was so high. In fact, the boy wasn't just saying that. He remembered the words of a mustachioed aristocrat who had long ago given him advice on how to seduce any lady. It was he who had told him that if everything was expensive and delicious, any lady would not resist. Because of that man's words, Hen was 100% confident. He touched his nose with such a smile, as if Ovetta had already confessed to him that he had won her heart, although in fact the girl was very dissatisfied with both the place and the prices. The heroine noticed that her interlocutor behaves very strangely and even confidently, which made her even more angry and pissed off. She does not understand what he wants, but the strange behavior of the boy only repulses her more. But she continued to hold the restaurant menu in her hands. She also kept her eyes on the suspicious boy. She stared at him intently, assuming that this was his way of asking her to apologize for what had recently happened between them. The girl even imagined how Hen seemed to be reaching out to her and loudly ordering her to enjoy these beautiful and expensive dishes so that she would not be angry with him anymore. But Ovetta knows it doesn't work that way. She kept looking at him, pondering that this is most likely what he wants to tell her. These thoughts caused the heroine to become more serious, looking at the boy who was no longer rude or demeaning to her. A slight blush appeared on the boy's cheeks when he looked at the heroine and, extending his hand to her, offered to help her with the choice of dish if she herself cannot make up her mind. But the protagonist decided to say clearly and angrily that they were leaving. On top of that, Ovetta decided to close the menu, looking at Hen and telling him that they're not just leaving here, but going to her favorite place. By looking at her companion, the girl was showing him her confidence and intentions to leave the place. Hen, who had only thought that Ovetta herself would fall on her knees in front of him for choosing to treat her with expensive dishes, didn't even expect it. He looked at her in surprise, as if he had forgotten the gift of speech for a few minutes. He looked at Ovetta, who from the looks of it was firmly convinced of what she was saying. Hen was frightened by this, and he simultaneously wanted to find the answer to why Ovetta had changed so much, what was wrong with her, and where he had gone wrong if she wanted to leave this place. Outraged by the protagonist's behavior, Hen got up from his seat, looking at Ovetta and telling her that it was very difficult to get a reservation here, so she should be happy for getting here. After that, there was a silence between the couple because both Ovetta and Hen didn't know what to say to each other, but the protagonist, like Hen, was still unhappy with the behavior of the one who wanted to apologize to her. Ovetta decided to finally close the menu of the restaurant, which she did not like, and then she lowered her eyes and told Hen that in this case, he would eat here by himself, without her. That's when Hen finally decided to calmly ask the main character why she was angry. Ovetta replied just as poised, informing Hen that it was too expensive here. The boy explained to her that they had the best ingredients and chefs here, so she should like it here. Touching the menu of the expensive restaurant, the girl said that maybe he was right because she couldn't consider this restaurant bad. Looking at Hen, the girl told him that sitting with someone like him made her very uncomfortable and uncomfortable. Then the girl's words finally silenced Hen. He looked at her in surprise because he did not even think that something Ovetta did not like. After all, he tried for her, inviting her to an expensive restaurant. He got sad too, which made him clench his hand into a fist, which was already resting on the closed menu book. He told her that she could tolerate him for at least one day for his own sake, instead of continuing to voice her displeasure. Ovetta looked at that boy who was clearly upset about the whole situation. He put his head down as the heroine looked at him, not knowing what to talk about next. But Ovetta was still angry with him. The protagonist sighed heavily as she realized that all this boy needed to do was satisfy his wants, just as he did with her. She thinks he only wished that Ovetta would have dinner with him and stop being mad at him. With these thoughts, the girl looked again at Hen, who was disgusted with her, saying that in that case she would eat whatever he ordered for her. But on Hen's own face, there was no longer the emotion of joy on his face that there had been in the beginning. Thus, the girl and the boy dined at an expensive restaurant where aristocrats from the upper classes usually have breakfast, dinner, and lunch. The night came, and the protagonist was home in her snow-white palace a long time ago. But for the protagonist, the surprises were just beginning. She was already dressed in her nightie because everyone had to go to bed, but she was walking around her bedroom with her mouth covered because she was very nauseous after the food she had eaten at the restaurant. The girl kept covering her mouth because she was about to throw up, but with her eyes downcast, she thought about the fact that although she was present with severe indigestion and stomach pain, she thought that the meal was worth it. She still couldn't forget the steak that Hen had ordered for her at that restaurant. It looked very beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and luxurious, and it tasted simply divine, as if it melted in her mouth. Ovetta liked it very much. However, no matter how delicious the food in that restaurant was, Ovetta could not forget the strange feeling that haunted her. She felt as if there was no one around but her and Hen, and when she sat there, she felt as if she was receiving a forced apology from the boy. But no matter how many minutes the girl remembered her dinner with Hen, she couldn't stand the nausea any longer. Ovetta ran out of her room, covering her mouth and wishing she was in the bathroom as soon as possible so no one would see her. 1 minute later, the girl found herself in the bathroom. She placed her wet hands on the sink because she had washed her hands earlier, thinking about how she was right after all about having to stop hanging out with Hen. Drops of water dripped off the protagonist's face as she was washing her face earlier to bring herself to her senses. She stared at the sink, realizing that Hen was even more nasty and bad than she had previously thought. The next day, the protagonist went to the academy as usual because she couldn't miss a day. Sometimes she went up to the teacher Corbin to say hello to him, but the teacher could not help but notice the fact that Ovetta became pale, as if sick. About this, he told the girl. The protagonist replied with a dose of positivity, waving her hand and replying that she just had a stomach ache and was actually fine. Ovetta had to make a fake smile in order for the teacher to stop worrying about her. However, the teacher was not reassured by this. He continued to look at the heroine with worry, telling her that he sincerely hoped she would get better. After that, he asked the girl why she suddenly decided to transfer to another class. Teacher Corbin even asked Ovetta who had wronged her, as if already knowing the fact that the girl might have transferred to another class because of one annoying boy. The teacher looked at her as if he was a little uncomfortable saying that. Ovetta thought about what she might say to the teacher. Imagining, the girl grabbed her teacher's shoulders, squeezed them, and shook them a little. This surprised and frightened Corbin, and Ovetta did it out of emotion. She shouted to her teacher that he was absolutely right. Continuing to hold her teacher's shoulders, the protagonist of the story told him that he was absolutely right for the reason that she was being bullied, and there was only one person in the class who was doing it and who she could hardly call a friend. Plus, Ovetta told Corbin that if she decides to end her relationship with him so easily, her life could turn into a nightmare, so she asks for his help. But after the teacher was unable to answer his student from shock, the girl realized that she had succumbed to her emotions. There was an awkward silence between them as Ovetta looked at Corbin, and he at her. The heroine pictured all of this in her mind and realized that she couldn't so easily tell it to her teacher, who probably wouldn't be able to help her in any way. She fixed her hair behind her ear and tried to tell Corbin that it wasn't that. Corbin asked the girl with a smile if she could think about the decision some more if she was having such a hard time answering. Ovetta stood by her side as Corbin told her that the process of transferring to another class was long and complicated. Ovetta sighed heavily, realizing that she wouldn't be able to get rid of the boy who was annoying her so easily. She told Corbin that, in that case, she would just wait and hope that everything would be fine and she would be transferred to another class. The main character of the story has her head down, looking at something with an angry look on her face. She realizes that for now it is in her power only to avoid Hen, because this is the only person in the academy who bullies and annoys her. With these thoughts, the girl continued to walk around the academy during breaks between classes. She constantly felt Hen's presence beside her, who always followed her like a stalker. Sometimes Ovetta went to extreme measures. She would hide behind desks, trying to hide from her stalker. There were times when the boy really couldn't find her, which Ovetta was happy about, but Hen was not happy. And in the most extreme cases, the girl hid even in the street, trying to hide from Hen, who was looking for her in all the corridors of the academy. He was only doing this during breaks, which made the main character very angry. Hen was also angry because he couldn't find Ovetta. He kept walking around the corridors in the academy until it was like nothing was around him, and all he wanted was Ovetta. He wasn't going to fall behind her. This was how the main character's school days went by, as she decided to hide from the annoying boy who needed her literally all the time, just to avoid seeing him. She sat down in her carriage to go home as soon as possible. In her own carriage, the girl was reading a book from the curriculum because she was used to studying not even in the academy. But her fascinating occupation was interrupted by the creak of the carriage door, which meant that someone opened it. When the girl looked at the person who decided to open the door of her carriage, she realized that she should not be happy or be calm, because this person turned out to be not the coachman, but Hen. He looked at the heroine without a smile or happiness. However, there was something in that blank stare, as if he wanted to tell her so much that he had been looking for her for a long time. With his red eyes, he looked Ovetta straight in the eyes, telling her that she could not leave him. But soon the boy showed Ovetta his satisfied smile, holding the ajar carriage door with his hand. But from the protagonist's face, it could be understood that she was not happy to see him at all, but rather, on the contrary, wished to forget him forever. Hen touched his hand to his chin, with a smirk telling the heroine of the story how he could not immediately guess that he could find her in his own carriage. But Ovetta was still blasé about whoever had dared disturb her peace. Then Ovetta could not stand it, and with intense anger began to shout at Hen, who only wished to find her. She asked him how he had the nerve to do such a thing, and whether he had his own carriage to keep him away from her. However, the boy had no intention of leaving the girl, but instead entered her carriage, looming over her and about to speak. He decided to remind Ovetta that she had advised him to speak of things what he didn't like, but now he expected her to do the same. For one moment, the protagonist imagined what would happen if she snapped and vented all her anger on the boy. She thought about telling him to quit chasing her because they could never be friends. But as the girl continued to stare at him, she realized that she couldn't be so direct in telling him that because it might offend him. Piercing the boy with her gaze, she decided she wasn't going to explain anything to him. Hen, too, was looking at the one he wasn't indifferent to, not understanding why she was suddenly silent. He grudgingly called her by name, as if he wanted to clarify everything quickly and understand why there was such animosity between them. The protagonist turned away from Hen, unhappily asking him what he wanted from her. She still decided to first clarify from the boy what he needs and why he still keeps up with her. Immediately after her question, the girl covered her ears with her hands, indicating that she didn't even want to hear an answer from him. Hen, on the other hand, continued to look at her with displeasure because he also felt displeased with her. Soon the boy decided not to embarrass the girl with his presence. He left the carriage, opening its door before doing so, and telling Ovetta that in that case, let her think about it, and then answer him when she could find the time. What was clear from the protagonist of the story was that she did not quite understand Hen's request. She escorted him with a glance, not fully understanding what he meant and whether he was even serious when he said that. After that, the protagonist lowered her head, and a second later, the door to the carriage was opened by Ordo. Ovetta was angry with him because it was because of her brother that she kept sitting in the carriage, which was the reason why Hen found her. Meanwhile, Ordo walked into her and apologized for being a little late at the academy today. The protagonist's brother sat down across from her so that he could get home as soon as possible. Ovetta would have continued to sit there with her head down if her brother hadn't pulled out a strange pouch and said that the reason he was delayed was because he had been given it in the hallway as he walked to the carriage. Ordo decided to examine the strange pouch to examine it from all angles. The protagonist speculated that it might be a gift from a secret admirer, but after all, her birthday and her brother's birthday were still quite a while away. This alone made Ovetta so angry at everything that she clenched both of her palms into a tight fist so hard that she began to shake them. She couldn't stand the fact that she was constantly being misunderstood by everyone around her and not getting any peace. Tammy Pace, the protagonist, drove home from the academy. Gradually, deep night came, the stars began to appear in the sky, and lights shone from the windows of the palace of the Alphonse family. The girl was going to sleep as usual. However, she didn't even have time to get into bed because a maid came to her with obviously important news for her. She looked at her as she told her that a letter had come to her. Ovetta was immediately interested in it. The maid presented the letter to the protagonist on a tray, whereupon Ovetta reached out to take it. Along with that, she wondered to the servant who the letter was from. The girl's emotions immediately became more negative and wary when she heard from the servant that it was a letter from someone in the Rehab family. Ovetta looked at the letter, which was adorned with the emblem of this family. Ovetta realized that the only person from the Rehab family who would want to send her a letter might be Hen, who was constantly pestering her. With unpleasant emotions, she decided to open the letter to read it. After opening all the sheets that were in the letter, the girl realized that her recipient clearly had something to say if he wrote her a lot of words that he couldn't say to her face. The letter began by addressing Ovetta herself, which told her that it was definitely Hen. Ovetta sat down on the bed so she could more comfortably read the letter from the annoying boy. It started off with the person who wrote it admitting that they wouldn't even introduce themselves because the heroine herself could figure out who was writing to her. The protagonist gradually began to read the letter, in which Hen wanted to convey his thoughts to her. The first thing he decided to write was that he knew very well that she was avoiding him after that dinner at an expensive restaurant. Reading the letter, the heroine began to remember that dinner with him. Also, the boy wrote in the letter that he sincerely does not understand why she does not want to see him and why she was so upset. The boy wrote these lines with obvious sadness on his face because he was worried about Ovetta. The boy's mind was a mess sometimes as he tried to fit all his thoughts about his relationship with his heroine into a letter. He would grab his head from it, but finally decided to write that he just wanted her to explain everything to him like a fool. Those lines are what Ovetta was considering now. Toward the end, the boy decided to write that he was really waiting for her reply and wanted her to write to him soon. The girl read the whole letter from Hen, without even realizing the effort and strangeness with which the boy wrote it. After reading the letter from Hen, the protagonist collapsed on her bed while the envelope and the sheets themselves from the boy lay beside her. She remembered that she had actually told him to write a letter if he had a lot on his mind. Yawning tiredly, the girl realized that she hadn't even thought about the fact that Hen would remember her words and do as she had advised him. But thanks to that, she now knows exactly what Hen wants from her and why he is after her. He needs an answer from Ovetta. Looking somewhere, Ovetta continued to lie on the bed and pondered the fact that now she would not avoid him, but would have to talk things out and explain. But before that, the girl decided to put everything in order. It was the next day after the protagonist received a letter from Hen and read it, deciding not to keep silent and not to run away from him. It was a clear, beautiful morning over the academy. It was just another school day for the girl. In the academy itself, Hen was already there, lounging on his desk, probably thinking about the uncomfortable situation with Ovetta. But his silence and thoughts were interrupted by someone placing their backpack on his desk next to him. The boy immediately raised his head to look up in surprise at the person who clearly wanted his attention. He saw a girl in front of him, who was wearing an elegant and modest green dress that emphasized her origin from a noble family. This girl turned out to be Ovetta, to which Hen was very surprised. He looked at her with a slight blush on his cheeks as the girl herself told him that he kind of wanted to talk to her. Hen hid his embarrassment in front of the heroine. Ovetta was already sitting down across from the boy to begin the very conversation that would set things straight. Hen was telling her that she should have at least given her a warning before showing up because she was disappearing and appearing out of nowhere. The boy's words only made the protagonist smile warmly, as if she was now mocking him instead of him mocking her. Looking him in the eyes, she said, "Maul, if he already does not want to talk to her, then she will leave." The girl even took her bag with her, which she had put on Hen's desk earlier, but the boy told her very indignantly not to go anywhere and to forget his words. And then he suggested that she walk instead of sitting in the classroom. Soon the pair found themselves in the garden of the academy, which had a bell tower in its architecture. Hen and Ovetta walked around it to tell each other everything that they had accumulated in their heads during their long feud. The couple walked away from all companies and people in order to be in the most deserted place possible. Then the protagonist turned to Hen and turned to him in order to confess everything honestly and say straightforwardly. Putting her hands around her waist, the girl looked at Hen and told him that they were a very bad match as friends. Hen continued to look at her already without mockery or derision, because he seriously cared about Ovetta's feelings. The surprised boy looked at the main character of the story and asked her what she told him. To this, Ovetta replied calmly, saying that he should listen to her more carefully so that he would not ask such questions. The girl explained to the Hen that she liked to spend her time in ordinary places, walking in parks and relaxing, but not sitting in expensive and luxurious establishments full of talkative aristocrats. The girl and Hen immediately pictured themselves as they sat around the table at a recent dinner. All the while, the boy kept looking at Oveta, who confessed everything to him without too much color. She kept telling him that she understood that he was an extrovert, and this was the norm for him, but she didn't like this kind of entertainment and establishment. Oveta would have kept talking if Hen hadn't looked at her and said that actually, it's not the norm for him. Oveta was a little surprised by this and immediately apologized for her false assumptions about him. A little worried, Hen replied to the girl that actually he doesn't go to such places, and that day he just decided to surprise her by inviting her to an expensive restaurant. The boy also said that he apologized to her for that. Thus, Pra continued talking, explaining all the ambiguities in their relationship in the empty but beautiful garden. Oveta also told him everything she felt, which made Hen realize what was wrong in their conversations. Gradually, the children began to babble about literally anything that came into their minds. They decided to sit on the grass, after which Oveta was the first to admit to him that she thought he was self-centered, like there was only his opinion and the wrong one. Hen replied that she was just like that. The protagonist wanted to question the boy about the last words, causing her to turn to him, but Hen continued talking about it, admitting that she is the only person who says everything to his face without making it up. After that, Hen stopped talking abruptly. He didn't know how to tell the girl what was on his tongue. Then, when he mustered up the courage, he turned to Oveta, who continued to look at him curiously. Oveta silently continued to look at Hen, who told her to always tell him such things at once in the future without hiding anything. The boy is asking this from Oveta for the reason that her silence made him worry a lot. Hen also looked at the heroine with complete seriousness, explaining his words by saying that he was very worried about her silence and her incomprehensible nature of not saying anything to him, but only avoiding everywhere. The boy even asked the protagonist to consider him an idiot or a fool for whom everything needs to be explained and who doesn't understand anything. This made Oveta smile slightly, causing her to agree with his words. The boy's red eyes continued to stare at Oveta. Hen was telling her that even if she thought they didn't match, she would have to be with him until the very end. While the heroine questioned him why it was she who had to be with him, Hen tried not to blush as red as a tomato. But instead of giving the girl a serious answer, Hen only smiled at her with all sincerity, saying that it would only be because he said so. At that moment, the heroine couldn't help but look at his charming smile. She paid attention to Hen's face, causing her to look at him with such surprise as if she had never seen his true positive emotions before. The boy's sincere smile made the heroine's eyes fixate only on his face. The boy's joy even made Oveta feel embarrassed. She began to look away, blushing with embarrassment and thinking about what it was and how she should act so as not to embarrass him even more, much less show her embarrassment. At this point, the protagonist realized that she shouldn't worry so much about whether or not this boy would bully her further. She looked at him and showed him her wide smile as well, agreeing with his words because she was sure that the upper-class aristocrat would definitely not give her a hard time. After this conversation, the protagonist did not even notice how quickly time flew. The seasons changed, but the academy was still as beautiful as a work of art. Oveta and Hen continued to study there and gain knowledge. Spring had arrived, thanks to which the bare trees in the garden of the academy gradually began to adorn themselves with pink flowers, filling the air around them with an unusually pleasant fragrance as well. The heroes of the story also grew like these blossoming trees. The main character grew up a lot, thanks to which she learned a lot. She held leaves in her hands and was beautifully dressed, because in the academy she had to meet the freshmen who had just entered the academy. The girl remembers that even yesterday she was a frightened student, and now she is already helping the newcomers not to get lost in the learning process. But along with the protagonist grew up and her friend, who used to be an annoying and narcissistic boy. It was he who suddenly decided to put his hand on the protagonist's head while holding the new roster of rookie students. Hen continued to keep his hand on the protagonist's head, causing her to have to look at him unhappily and ask him if he wanted to finally move his hand aside because she wasn't comfortable. But the guy wasn't going to apologize to Oveta for his behavior. He only smiled at her, telling the heroine that maybe then everyone around would notice a cutie and beauty like her. Hen, who had already grown noticeably older, had not changed in any way in terms of his character. He looked at the girl with a sly face and a smile, asking if she agreed with his words. Hen was also the one who was supposed to guide the newcomers in the academy through the offices, so he stood beside the heroine. No matter how much Ovetta tolerated his temper and got used to it, she still could not take the boy's jokes adequately, causing her to look the boy in the eyes with displeasure and anger. Looking at the young lady, Hen told her that he did it for the reason that no one could see her at all because of her low stature, and thus he decided to help her. Ovetta resented this, saying that if he was so clever, he should go and distribute the leaflets himself because his ugly face could be seen everywhere. But Hen did not stop, but kept pestering Ovetta, asking her if she knew a person at the academy who would have a head as big and conspicuous as his. Ovetta replied that it's probably only because of his head that he talks nonsense. The boy, gesturing with his hand, decided to answer the girl that maybe he didn't have the biggest head in the empire because he was just too tall. Ovetta continued to stand by his side, remembering that his height was indeed about 180 centimeters. The protagonist began to shout in frustration while Hen looked at her with a smile. Ovetta was angry that even her brother Ordo had become 2 meters tall, and she compared to him was just a little girl who was hard to spot in the crowd. When he stopped mocking the heroine, Hen decided to ask Ovetta if she needed help, but she said that she didn't need help from snotty people and that she would handle it herself, and then she called the guy next to her, whose name was Garland. It turns out that the protagonist wanted to ask Garland for help, while ignoring the help of Hen, who was standing next to her and was not happy about it. Ovetta looked at her acquaintance and asked him if he could help her with the flyers. Garland gladly answered the girl that he would help her in this case, and then Ovetta gave him a stack of leaflets, which she wanted to give him, but they were interrupted by someone who, in one movement, snatched all these leaflets from the heroine's hand so that they did not get to Garland. It was Hen. He held the flyers up, glaring unhappily at Ovetta to make sure no one else took them away. The boy wouldn't stand for the heroine refusing his help while smiling at the other man. What was evident from Hen was that he was jealous of Ovetta's attention. After that, Hen didn't even think of giving the flyers to anyone else, which only made the protagonist give Garland a fake laugh while apologizing for everything. Garland said with a smile that he understood, and in that case, he would go. As soon as the white-haired guy left, Hen immediately turned to Ovetta and asked her what was wrong with her. In response, the girl asked him a question as well, not sure what he meant. Hen continued to hold the protagonist's flyers in his hand, asking her with frustration why she chose to ask for help from someone else when he had previously directly offered to help her on this matter. Annoyed at the boy, Ovetta replied that she wouldn't even have asked him for help, because if she did, she wouldn't have heard happy words from someone as unpleasant as Hen that he would certainly help her. After that, the girl generally decided to tell Hen that every time she asked him for help, he only marveled at her weakness, asking how she could even do anything with her small hands. Hen continued to smile at Ovetta, telling her that he was telling the truth after all, so she shouldn't be mad at him. Ovetta smiled at him too, asking how long it had been since he had been slapped on the cheek for being so annoying. The guy eventually decided to put his hand on the protagonist's shoulder to calm her down. Ovetta actually breathed a sigh of relief because she didn't want to be angry with Hen anymore and waste her nerves on him. Soon, new students entered the academy, and they were the ones who needed to be pointed in the right direction. They looked around and marveled at the architecture of the academy, and Ovetta and Hen looked at them. Ovetta reacted to the children instantly and more animatedly than Hen. She wanted to approach them right away, but the boy only looked at them with wonder and curiosity. He looked more at Ovetta than he did at the people he had to deal with. Hen even smiled with pleasant feelings when he started to observe the good mood of the main character. He likes to see her happy, and it will always be a nice thing for him, as if she was already his own. The protagonist decided to do her job right away. She walked up close to one of the newcomers, coughing a little before speaking. She wanted to make a cool impression on all the freshmen to show that the upperclassmen were cool. Deciding to use her charming, bright smile, the protagonist looked at the freshman and extended her hand to him, asking for his name. There was such a bright energy emanating from the girl that it was hard to miss. The boy with brown hair and gray eyes turned to Ovetta and looked at her in slight amazement. With his hand he held his bag, telling Ovette that his name was Garrett Galileo. He then asked the girl if she was lost by chance. The boy's question put the protagonist in a stupor. A moment ago she wished she could appear cool, but just one question from the newcomer made her image disappear in an instant. She realized that she didn't even look older than the youngsters. To smooth over the awkwardness, the protagonist decided to reach out to the boy and shake his hand, as they do when they meet. Garrett was surprised, but silently did the same, while the protagonist thought that, of course, she was glad that he looked older than his years, that she looked older than her years, but it still embarrassed her. After that, the girl pointed to some side with her finger, telling Herat that he should go to Class A, which was that way. The boy smiled at the protagonist before asking her again if she was a first year at the academy. The question from the boy once again made the protagonist doubt that she had enough confidence to show the beginners their way. This was evident on her face, which expressed extreme incomprehension. The girl didn't even know what to say to Garrett, who still thought that she was a first year in the academy. As the girl stammered, she didn't even notice the fact that one very tall man had appeared behind her. With one motion of the hand in which Hen was holding a stack of papers, he made the silly boy and Ovetta move away from each other because, in Hen's opinion, they were standing too close just talking about classes. The boy immediately turned his attention to Hen, looking at him a little scared. Ovetta did the same when Hen was telling the newcomer that she was in his class. As he did so, he continued to hold up the papers that shielded the heroine from the stranger. And to explain to the boy that he wasn't talking to a freshman or a freshman, Hen had him look at the name tag that was on Ovetta's chest. Hen told Garrett that only upperclassmen have such name tags, and he should know that. When Garrett finally realized that the person in front of him was not a minor, but a senior student who had a lot of experience in the academy, he was startled out of his shock when he asked Ovetta if she was older than him. To Garrett, it was a real surprise. As soon as Hen explained everything, he already watched with a simple face as Garrett bowed to the girl, apologizing for mistaking her for a minor to begin with. The heroine was also embarrassed, waving her hands and hinting to the boy not to apologize. After that, Garrett ran towards his group that the protagonist had told him about. Ovetta waved goodbye to him, telling him that everything was fine and he shouldn't get lost anymore. Hen, on the other hand, looked at Garrett as if she didn't want to see him around Ovetta anymore. But even in this situation, Hen needed to poke fun at the main character. Ott wanted to poke her on the cheek, telling her that she didn't really look that young, after which he asked her to confess it. And that pissed off the main character. The girl turned to Hen and told him that she wouldn't confess to anything. She even confessed that it was scary for her to hear that because she was getting thoughts about how she had stopped growing. Ovetta looked at the yawning Hen and realized one strange thing. The girl realized that everyone around him always gave him respect, as if it was written on his forehead that he was of blue blood, but it didn't happen to her. Sometime after the heroes had done their work, the bell rang, which meant that it was time for the lesson for all the students in the academy. Ovetta and Hen quickly went to class so as not to be late. As soon as the protagonist sat down at her pair, she laid on it like a bed because she was very tired. She thought about the fact that although she didn't have a meal, she enjoyed helping the newcomers. At this time, Teacher Corbin was checking with the students to see if everyone was in place. After making sure Corbin looked at the students graciously and then congratulated them on their last school year, wishing that it would be as successful and good as all the previous school years of the students at the academy. The teacher's beauty made the protagonist admire him while sitting at her desk. A light blush appeared on her cheeks as she thought about the fact that Corbin always looked flawless, which made his beauty drive her crazy. Next to Ovetta sat Hen as well, who was listening intently to the teacher. All the seniors listened attentively to Corbin, who told everyone to remember to write and hand in their future career goals on a sheet of paper. That is, write about what they want to be after graduation, gesturing with his hands and smiling at everyone. He said they had a month to do this, after which they would be sure to turn in the paper. The heroine realized that the time had come when she would have to decide her own future. She was already holding a pencil in her hands in order to write this essay, but she looked at the worksheet and did not understand where she should start and what kind of career she wanted to create for herself in order to be a professional in this business. Because of her thoughts, the protagonist imagined an initiation into a higher nobility. In her imagination, she pictured an aristocrat laying a sword on another aristocrat's shoulder, initiating him somewhere. Ovetta realized that as she grew older, many children would inherit their parents' title. Also, the protagonist introduced a happy couple who got engaged by playing a wedding. The girl realized that in addition to inheriting titles, many young men from the aristocracy choose to marry higher-ranking people in order to have a good life. The protagonist realized that personally in her case, when a successor has already been chosen in the family, the second child needs to make up her own mind about the future path in life, and this child she is. With such thoughts, the girl wanted to write an essay about herself and her path. However, the main character's thoughts were interrupted by Hen, who was sitting next to her and looking at what she was doing. He asked her what she was going to write about in her essay about her own life path. The protagonist was slightly startled and then looked at Hen with a surprised look. She was disconnected from her thoughts and dreams because of the boy who was asking her questions even during class. Hen also had a sheet on which he had to write his career path after graduating from the academy, but instead of writing about it, looked at Oveta and waited for her answer. He was genuinely curious about the girl's future, though he looked at her without emotion. The protagonist had already envisioned herself as a fair judge with glasses and a book in her hands, who would decide the cases of the citizens using only justice, intelligence, and logic. Oveta told Hen that she wanted to be in the Ministry of Justice. That made Zen smile. He kept looking at the heroine, asking her if that was the reason she chose to study law at the academy. The girl said that it was, then asked why she wanted to do it then. Hen decided to taunt the girl once again by answering her seemingly rhetorical question. He said that it was the most common and easy specialty to choose. The boy's words infuriated the protagonist, causing her to call him a fool in her mind. What made the protagonist even more angry was that no matter how hard she tried, she was always in second place to Hen, who was always better in knowledge of subjects. She remembers that when she looked at the results of her exams, it made her incredibly angry, while Hen only made her smile. Because of her turbulent thoughts, the protagonist kept looking at her partner who was smiling at her with a sly look. She couldn't understand if he was so smart and clever, then who did he become so savvy into? The boy kept looking at Oveta as she lay down on her desk with words to the effect that she had long ago decided on a career, but if the ministry needed her to be over 20 years old to work, then she would be able to travel the world. The girl's words made Hen smile even wider, after which he said through a smile that in that case he would travel the world with her. This angered Oveta, causing her to ask if she had invited him at all. To teach the boy a lesson, wanting to be with her all the time and spoil her plans, Oveta decided to play along and tell Hen that she had to make all the plans she had planned for her life before work. Hen strongly disliked the words of the protagonist when she started telling him that before work she would definitely make a lot of friends, go shopping with him, and then she would also date someone. Oveta continued to play around, clenching her hands into a fist from fake positive emotions and telling Hen that she really wanted to start meeting someone now. To this, a disgruntled Hen asked Oveta why she needed to start getting to know someone else. The main character looked at him like that, as if she didn't hear what he said. She asked him what he meant by his words, and then Hen told her that whatever she said she could do to him. An angry Hen even got up from his seat and told a surprised Oveta that she could start doing everything she said right now without waiting for adulthood and graduation from the academy. The heroine was greatly surprised by this, but in Malik's happy eyes there was only determination and drive towards her goals. He kept looking at Oveta, who in no way expected her plan to get out of hand. Hen even told her that he was fully prepared for it. The main character was already regretting that she had decided to play along and anger Hen with her words. The boy was looking somewhere out the window while Oveta stared at him intently because she couldn't hide her anger from him. The girl was looking at Hen with a face like she was wishing Hen would look at her and realize how angry she was at him. She sat across from him and kept her eyes on him because she was traveling with him in the same carriage. She looked at the thoughtful Hen and almost cursed herself for saying such stupid things about meeting a guy and shopping. Because of that, she was already sitting in the carriage with him, because Hen suggested she go shopping right now. Also, the protagonist was also embarrassed by the silence that arose between them. She decided to interrupt him by asking him with a smile if he had any other friends he could spend time with. Hen immediately replied to Oveta that he couldn't tell her that for sure. The boy immediately assumed that his partner didn't like spending time with him. Because of this, he looked at her calmly, asking her why she didn't like traveling with him, since he even agreed to a cup of tea after shopping. Ovetta immediately told the boy that she wasn't trying to tell him that she didn't like shopping with him, but she meant that boys nowadays have different interests as girls, and Hen only wants to spend time with her. The main character remembered herself because she is also the kind of girl who is not interested in typical girl talk topics. She pictured in her mind the cute girls who were probably discussing something girly. With a twirl of his finger, the boy asked Ovetta if she had any topics that she didn't discuss even with her own brother. Ovetta answered him that of course she did, because Ordo is not a girl at all. The boy then looked at Ovetta curiously and asked her if that meant that her girlish topics she couldn't discuss even with him. The protagonist clenched her hands into fists and told him that he had the right idea. Placing her hands on her knees, the girl continued to ride in silence in the carriage with Hen. She thought about the fact that there was no way she could tell him how her stomach hurt during her period and how she liked the latest fashion dress, because he would never understand. Because of this, the protagonist remembered how Hen often likes to read a variety of books, either at the academy or at home. She realized that it didn't interest him at all, and he would most likely brush it off if she started telling him something about girlhood. These thoughts made the protagonist smile slightly with such warmth as if that was all that pleased her. She continued to ride in the carriage in Hayne's company, smiling at the happy thoughts in her head. However, there was still no way Hayne would settle down. He looked at Ovetta and asked her if he was still her closest friend in the entourage. Ovetta waved her hand, hinting him not to worry about it and saying that, of course, he was. The girl would have continued to sit in the carriage and talk to Hen about a variety of topics if she hadn't noticed something in the carriage window that caught her attention greatly. She looked at the scenery she saw in the window. The girl put her hand on the glass of the window because she couldn't get enough of the buildings and stores in the city. There was a variety of people who wanted to buy something, thanks to which the heroine realized that this was the place for shopping. The joyful protagonist immediately got out of the carriage with happy emotions, looking at the architecture and stores around her, while Hen negotiated with the coachman about not going anywhere and waiting for them here. Overjoyed, the girl turned to Hen and with a smile told him not to stand a pillar somewhere in the distance, but to have fun and dance like she did. There were real emotions of joy on Ovetta's face, as if Hen had realized her dream. However, unlike the protagonist, Hen continued to be a decent young man who didn't want to appear unserious in public. He only looked at Ovetta with a smile, telling her not to stumble from such joy. With good spirits, the couple continued to stroll down the streets past stores and people. The heroine of the story even danced with joy and walked ahead as Hen kept up with her, but also smiled looking at Ovetta. The heroine didn't even notice how she could easily bump into someone in the crowd with her careless movements. She wanted to get closer to the shop, which was selling beautiful earrings, but then Hen was wary because he realized that she couldn't avoid colliding with someone. It was no surprise to Hen that Ovetta fell to the ground because she didn't stop running in time. She was slightly shocked by this, which was evident from her emotions as Hen gently helped her to her feet. Once the girl was on her feet, Hen immediately began to look her over for injuries and cuts, while asking the girl if she was all right. Ovetta answered him that she was fine and not to worry so much. However, Hen was interested in the protagonist's arm, which surely could have been bruised or wounded. He asked the girl about it, to which she replied that it was a little itchy, but she was fine. Hen continued to marvel at how Ovetta could constantly get into trouble. Deciding not to give the heroine any more opportunities to fall or hurt herself, Hen grabbed her arm and led her somewhere away from the crowd, which he didn't want to see. Hen didn't want the girl to fall and hurt herself anymore. He looked at her and told her bluntly that he would always hold her hand from now on so that she would not get lost in the crowd in any way. The boy also asked Ovetta not to let go of his palm either. The boy said this with redness on his face from embarrassment. After discussing all the nuances about safety, the couple decided to walk down the street again. The protagonist remained silent, looking at Hen, while he was wondering from her if she was tired and asking her to let him know when she couldn't walk. Ovetta didn't utter a word. She only looked at the boy with those gray eyes. It was as if she saw something in him. She no longer saw in him that annoying bully who brought her nothing but trouble, but she saw in front of her a boy who no longer hid from her the fact that her health was important to him. The girl decided to look not only at Hen's face, but also at his palms. She realized that they were incredibly beautiful, just like his face. The heroine was surprised by this because before sincerely thought that his beauty was limited only to a smarmy face. Having admired the boy's hand, the protagonist decided to vent all her discontent on him about the fact that he goes much faster than her. She told him that he shouldn't be in such a hurry, as if he wanted to take off. Hen immediately took notice of this. Although he too held a grudge against the main character, he didn't want to say something nasty or harsh back to her. He only looked at her angrily, apologizing for his joints and saying that he just wasn't paying attention. But the boy's anger, awkwardness, and embarrassment immediately left him because Oveta herself wanted to cheer him up a bit. She looked at him kindly, telling him that there was nothing wrong with it and that he just needed to be a little slower. Because of the girl's words, Hen immediately turned away from her as he continued to stare ahead. He was confused by the whole situation, trying to figure out if he felt embarrassed because of the heroine's fall, or whether it was because there was clearly something niggling in his heart. And the protagonist continued to babble about all sorts of things to distract Hen from the awkwardness in their conversation. She did so with an unnatural face, while wondering if she was squeezing his big hand too hard, or if she needed to buy some ointment for it. But even the girl's talk couldn't distract the boy from the fact that he was very embarrassed about her. No blush passed over his face as he asked himself how he could leave her alone for 5 minutes without her doing something wrong. The couple continued to walk through the stores, holding each other's hand. Hen couldn't stop thinking about Oveta, and Oveta herself was thinking about the things that were around her. The boy thought that if he had nothing to stop him from carrying her in his arms right there, he would do it with great pleasure. That was how the main character of the story spent her day, which first started with the academy and ended with an interesting shopping trip with Hen. She found herself with her castle when it was already completely dark around. The girl immediately fell onto the soft bed to enjoy it soon after a long, hard day. She stretched with joy, telling herself that today was a very interesting day. In addition to the vivid emotions and memories, there was no way the girl could forget Hen's strange behavior and emotions that she had observed throughout the walk. She remembered his face, which was both angry and sweet, as if he had mixed feelings. But the girl herself decided not to even think about the fact that maybe Hen felt something special. Instead, the girl waved a hand over her face, coaxing herself not to think about it, but to ponder on something else. And the protagonist managed to redirect her thoughts in a direction that was more correct in her opinion. She looked up at the ceiling and thought about where she should go and where she should enter if she was already in her senior year. She remembered her own words again, the ones she had said to Henu earlier. She assumed that she would gradually pass all the exams with a high score, after which she would probably date someone since she wasn't the heir to the family. The girl also remembered that she really wanted to travel the world and collect all sorts of tea leaves, which she had told Henu earlier. The girl had already visualized herself as a more mature adult who was on her way to conquer the world with a smile. The girl realized that while Ordo was diligently preparing to become a true heir and put on the family uniform, Oveta would pass all the exams with flying colors, and then she would have parties and tea parties with lots of tea. The girl visualized herself and Ordo in her thoughts. With such thoughts, the girl decided to get out of bed, realizing that this was just the perfect plan for her future life. She smiled with positive emotions, because this is exactly what she will strive for in the future. Humming different tunes that she knows, Oveta stretched as she walked towards the door. She thought about the fact that she was in a great mood right now, so she should go and get something to eat. With a good mood, the girl wanted to leave her bedroom. She walked down the hallway to the dining hall where there was a long table just for the aristocrats to eat at. The girl peeked out from behind the doorway where she saw her mother, who was just sitting there, probably waiting for food from the cook. Oveta was adjusting the light cloak on her shoulders, looking at the other chairs, which were empty for some reason, but now it was going to be a family dinner. She asked her mother where Ordo was, not understanding why he was late. The Marquise looked at her daughter and told Oveta that Ordo had told her that he was not hungry. Therefore, after his homework, he would go straight to bed. Oveta was surprised to ask her mother if this was true. To reassure her daughter, the Marquise told her that she had sent the maid Ellie to Ordo to check on his condition, so there was no need to worry. After that, her mother asked Oveta how her day was, because she had heard that she had walked in the square today. The girl replied that it was quite fun and the streets were crowded. The girl kept telling something to her mom, remembering also Hen, who was always by her side and decorated the whole walk. But at the same time, the main character's thoughts were interrupted by worry about her brother. She wanted even more to know what was wrong with him and whether it was true that he was not well. Because of her worries, the girl could no longer sit at dinner with her mother. She decided to eat quickly, after which she took one sandwich in her hands and walked with it to her brother's room to visit him not empty-handed. Holding the gift for her brother in her other hand, the girl knocked on his door with her other hand, waiting for him to open it or tell her to come in. But so far the girl had heard neither, so she continued to stand there and knock. Meanwhile, in his room, Ordo was already realizing that he was being broken into just because he told everyone he wasn't hungry. He slapped himself in the face, realizing that his family is very annoying and persistent, but he still has to open the door. The boy already wanted to get out of bed and go to the door to open it, but he didn't have to because Ovetta did it all by herself. Ordo saw her with a serious face and a sandwich she was holding in her hand. The main character immediately came closer to him and asked him with a smile why he was sitting here in proud solitude, telling everyone that he supposedly didn't want to eat. Ordo turned to his sister and told her that if she wanted to argue, then let her leave at once. To get his sister out of the room as soon as possible, Ordo told her that his stomach has been upset lately and he doesn't want to mess with her, so she should leave. But Ovetta doesn't even plan on leaving her brother in the lurch. Ordo looked unhappily at his sister, who told him that she had asked Rio to make this sandwich just for him, so he would be very offended if she returned his full plate with the unaffected sandwich. After persuasion, Ordo still took the plate with the sandwich and held it out to himself, telling her to give him this dish sooner already. Ovetta answered him, wishing that he would eat with great pleasure. Ordo took the first bite, taking a small bite from the sandwich and speaking words of thanks to his sister. Lowering his gaze, the protagonist's brother continued to munch on the rather tasty sandwich from the chef. The guy continued to eat and savor the taste of the sandwich while his sister stood beside him and looked at something that had clearly caught her curiosity. She couldn't take her eyes off the thing because of her interest in it. The thing was that there was a sheet on Ordo's desk that wasn't just a homework assignment that he had told the whole family about. The protagonist immediately realized what it was when she examined the sheet closer. The protagonist realized that her brother was bending his back over the essay that all the Chenniks were assigned to write in a month, and it was about what a student would do after graduating from the academy. Ordo had already written something on the paper that was titled My Goals. Looking briefly at her brother and his writing, the protagonist decided to look at him and directly turned to say something. Ordo immediately turned to his sister, munching on his sandwich and asking her what was wrong. Putting her hands on her waist, Ovetta looked at her brother determinedly and told him that she was going to take an exam to get a law license so she could then understand the law. But Ordo wasn't happy about it. He just continued eating the sandwich, chewing it in his mouth, and telling his sister that he was already visualizing in his head how the empire was crumbling before his eyes. Ovetta only clenched her hand into a fist and told him that she would definitely start this destruction with him. However, Ovetta didn't mock her brother, who already had a lot of worries due to studying and preparing to become the heir to the family's title. She looked at him with a smile, asking him where he himself intended to go after the academy. Ordo continued to look at his sister already without his sandwich because her question seriously interested him. Ovetta continued to ask him what kind of future he was preparing for himself and who he saw himself as. The boy turned away from the protagonist because he could not understand himself. He only briefly told his sister that he understood perfectly well that he was destined to become the heir of the family, that is, to be a marquis after his father. Then the boy looked once more at all the papers that were before his face. He was trying to compose that very essay on the topic of his future, but he still couldn't catch inspiration, which made the papers look boring and the text blank. Ordo continued to stare at his essays, telling his sister that it was very strange for him to write it all on paper. What the boy means is that he's never done it before, plus it makes him feel a strange sensation. The future successor of the Alphonse family holds in his hands his writings about his own future and does not understand why he needs them because he already knows that he is to be the heir. Ordo asks himself, is this really all he is good for? Introducing himself to the academy, Ordo decided to confess to the main character that he had always been very proud of his intelligence and attractiveness, But in the end, he didn't need it because he was the chosen one from the beginning. The boy looked at his essay again, which turned out to only have a couple short words. Ordo continued to talk to Ovetta, telling her that he felt like a worthless loser who was walking down a pre-trodden path called family successor. Ovetta kept looking at her brother and listening to his words, not realizing if he was whining now or just farting. Because of this, she looked at him with incomprehension and wariness. She had clearly never seen Ordo in such a mood before. Ordo went on about his business, that is, writing the essay he was thinking about. Ovetta looked at him with sad thoughts, realizing that he was the poor guy who was probably distraught right now. The protagonist remembers that she always saw her older brother as a confident man who knew a lot and was always ready to help, but now she sees an almost helpless man in front of her. Then the protagonist decided to cheer up her brother, who was very sad about his future. She looked at him for the umpteenth time with a sincere smile, asking if he knew how many people are trying to find their way in life. Ordo immediately turned to the girl. After the rhetorical question, the girl suddenly collapsed on her brother's bed, telling him not to be sad, because with such a cute face and wit, he was unlikely to be lost, but on the contrary, he could develop anywhere he wanted. His sister's behavior really surprised Ordo. He looked at her with the same amazement while she asked him if everything had to be decided now. What the heroine meant was that he shouldn't be in a hurry to go anywhere. After that, the protagonist put her palm to her face and then looked at her brother through her fingers, as if with a magical voice telling him not to rush or worry about anything. Looking at her brother through her fingers. The girl was still lying on his bed as well, advising him to become a marquis first, and then if he didn't like being one, to find another occupation that he would enjoy. Having finished giving her brother advice, the girl flashed out of bed, telling Ordo that in her opinion he would make an excellent prime minister who could get her out of trouble without much effort. To this, Ordo replied that he needed to get out of them first too. Getting motivated to cheer her brother up even more, the girl turned to him and told him that he wasn't a loser at all, and his life didn't have to be fabulous and outstanding because it already was. Hoping that she had encouraged her brother to embark on new endeavors, the protagonist had already reached the door to leave Ordo's room. She waved her hand at him, telling him that on that note she would go to bed. As soon as the protagonist left, Ordo couldn't contain his smile as he continued to look at his writing. He was amused that a fool like Ovetta had come to him to dispense advice, and so insistently, as if he had only been waiting for her. The night passed quickly enough, followed by a clear morning, and that meant that once again Ovetta and Ordo would have to get into their carriage and head to the academy. Ovetta and Ordo were already sitting in it while the coachman ordered the horses to move. The heroine of the story was sleepy, but Ordo was not. He coaxed her about not telling her parents anything about yesterday, to which the girl replied with a yawn that she would. Ordo then asked her if she had asked him to read a collection of court decisions the other day. It was as if Ovetta's sleep was removed by hand when she heard something regarding something she was interested in. She looked at her brother, asking him if she was going to be shown the Imperial Library in the prince's mansion just for that. Ordo replied that he just didn't feel like being her debtor and listening to her constant rebukes. A joyous Ovetta clutched at her own hands. She told Ordo that she sincerely, from the bottom of her heart, wanted to wish her that he owed her all her life and that he would continue to be so nice and polite to her. Eventually, the girl couldn't contain the emotions that were spilling out. She jumped up, exclaiming that she was very happy, to which Ordo only told her to be quiet because it wasn't cultural. With an equally good mood, the protagonist appeared in front of someone who had no way of understanding why she was smiling so widely, wanting to show the whole world the emotion of happiness. Ovetta continued to look at her friend with a slight blush on her face. This friend turned out to be Hen, who also happened to be a familiar to all the Academy for nobles. He looked puzzled at his friend, who told him that she would not tell him the reasons for her joy so easily. Hen didn't like it very much. He pointed his index finger, angrily and indignantly asking the girl if she had any secrets from him that she didn't want to tell him. The girl replied that there was no way she would hide anything from him. To this, Hen replied that it is more right, and he doesn't want to even hear from her anymore that there are any secrets between them. Ovetta replied that today she's been hearing displeasures from him all day long. She just has to say a word. Hen got even more angry, saying that if she is like that, He will torture her with questions right now. All the while, the pair sat at the same desk, boring each other through smiles. Ovetta, with a sly smile, advised the boy to do something useful instead of asking her about nonsense. Hen replied that it was the fact of having a secret that pissed him off, and then he asked her why she didn't tell him if she said it was nothing. Ovetta decided not to bore the boy with her silence, looking at him with enthusiastic eyes. She confessed to him that she was going to the Emperor's library today, which she was certainly very excited about. The protagonist only needed to tell the boy a secret to still feel even happier than before afterward. But there was no bright emotion of joy on Hen's face. Hen continued to look at the heroine as if she hadn't told him something. He asked her if it was all Eli, to which a slightly angry Ovetta replied that it was just as she said, it was a small thing, after which she asked Hen if he would be there because he often travels to the prince's estate. Hen replied that he actually had things to do. The boy even began to mock himself, telling Ovetta with a smile that he was the busiest and most important person in the entire empire. The heroine laughed in response, saying that he was important, just like a paper rooster. After studying at the academy, the protagonist, along with her brother, and got to the estate, where they must meet the prince. They were bowed to by a servant with a sword, who said that the prince is preparing to receive guests, and they need to wait a little. Ordo said that there was nothing wrong with that, after which he said that in that case they would wait. Ovetta decided to wait too, because that was all she could do in a slightly unfamiliar place. She twisted her head around in different directions because she felt a distinct discomfort that only prevented her from enjoying the architecture of the building or anything else. In response, Ordo looked at his sister indignantly and told her that he was only uncomfortable because of her decent behavior. Ovetta replied that in that case she could act like a hurricane, but her brother told her that in that case she would never see the library again. Ovetta continued to taunt her brother, telling him that she actually only wanted to say hello and then run straight to the library afterward. Ordo wanted to respond to his sister by telling her that she didn't even know where the library was, but his words were interrupted by a servant who loudly announced to the heroes that the prince was ready to meet them. With that, Ordo and Ovetta culturedly approached the door that the servant was about to open for them. He took hold of the handle so that the aristocrats could meet and talk quietly without much trouble. In the room, which shone with such cleanliness, stood the prince, who immediately turned to his guests with a slight smile, welcoming them into his domain. Even the boy's clothes sparkled, speaking of his high status. Ovetta and Ordo immediately decided to bow to the one far above them in nobility. They did so in sync while the prince looked at the protagonist who was giving him her first and last name. The prince's attention quickly became attached to the girl. He looked at the protagonist with a surprise that he could not even hide. The prince politely, but also surprised, said her name, and then Ovetta responded, asking the prince what he needed and what was wrong. Ovetta looked up as the prince came closer to her to say something. She watched the aristocrat cough as she mumbled that they had seen each other before at the banquet, but that was no longer important. Behind the prince stood a single servant, while he himself waved his hand with a smile, telling his red-haired guests to make them sit back and make themselves at home, not to deny themselves anything or be shy. Before they sat down, however, the couple couldn't help but ask the prince about the library that Ovetta had dreamed of. The first to speak of it was Ordo, who politely asked the prince where the library was in this place, but his sister outdid him by saying the same thing, only with brighter colors of joy. The prince was already seated at the table, getting a smile from Ovetta. Ordo, on the other hand, was serious, seeming to be angry at his sister for allowing herself to be sincere without being polite. The prince asked the heroine if she likes to read, to which Ovetta said that, of course, she adores it, after which she once again asked the nobleman where the books in the library are. In fact, the girl perfectly feels the pressure from her brother, who looked at her with such an angry look, as if he wished that she would soon sing. What an uncultured way to behave. But Ovetta realizes that she is overly eager to read new books. With thoughts of books in the library, the girl decides to pick up the cup into which her tea was poured in order to drink it all at once. This was noticed by both the prince and Ordo, who was even more angered by his sister's behavior. Not intending to restrain himself any longer, Ordo decided to remind the girl where she was by kicking her hard on the heel. Meanwhile, Ordo was talking to the prince as if nothing had happened, and Ovetta was happily telling him that the tea was marvelous. The Prince of the Empire only laughed modestly as he continued to sit at the table and look at the heroes. He said that it seems like Oveta really only has the library on her mind, and if that's the case, he would be willing to take her to it personally. Ordo was greatly surprised by this. On the surface, the brother and sister seemed like nice and cultured children who sat with the prince and ate their meals, but in reality, Oveta could snap at Ordo out of anger, asking him what he had done. But the boy was drinking tea at the same time, as if it wasn't because of his words that the prince wanted to see Oveta off. After a while, the protagonist was already walking behind the prince. He was smiling all the time, which gave him a light, kind aura. Sometimes the heroine looked at him out of curiosity, behaving more modestly and reservedly with him. The protagonist assumed that they would walk like that in silence, but suddenly the prince decided to ask the girl what she liked, at the same time turning back to see her face. The heroine was surprised by the question, interrogating the prince to see if he was really saying what to her. Turning fully to the girl, the prince told her that there was no one else here besides her and him, so it was logical that she was the one he was asking the question to. The prince wanted to ask the lady if she had another twin, but the protagonist thought only that he wanted to play with her. Noticing Oveta's strange reaction, the prince decided to explain his questions by saying that he used to firmly believe that she and Ordo had a lot in common, but as time went on, the prince said he realized that wasn't true at all. The heroine lowered her gaze downward, admitting to the prince that they had often been confused for each other as children. The girl quickly realized that the prince must have meant that she, unlike her brother, did not watch her tongue. He continued to look at her with a smile, while Oveta realized that she had to be a little more polite, because the prince was one of those who had confused her with her brother. In order to avert suspicion, the protagonist decided to tell the prince in an insecure and very naive way that she actually likes pomegranates very much. Then her interlocutor and said that she and her brother are very similar. These words put Oveta at ease. Feeling a light blush on his cheeks, the prince walked to some door, then with a smile told Oveta that they had come to the very library. The aristocrat even told the heroine that it was now completely hers for her entire stay at the manor. As soon as the protagonist only went inside, she was immediately overwhelmed by the incredible shock of what she saw. She looked at all the books, which were in the library of the Empire, and could not find the words to describe her amazement. Even her eyes sparkled with joy and happiness, and her cheeks were covered in even more red blush than they had been before. She said to herself that it was a pity she could not read in such a short time absolutely all the books in the library. When the prince heard this, he turned to her and told her that in that case the doors to the library would always be open only for her. Oveta became even happier, clarifying to the nobleman if she could come here every day. The prince, who was like a cloud because of his cute appearance and personality, only briefly told the protagonist of the story that there was no way they could be disturbed by a regular guest, especially since he wanted to gain new knowledge. After the prince left, leaving the girl alone with the books of the Empire, the girl immediately decided to look for the topic she needed, looking at all the books and running her index finger over them to examine every detail in them. The girl didn't have to hiccup for long because she was able to quickly find the right big book for her, which, with its red color, perfectly matched her hair color. It turned out to be a collection of sentences, which the heroine wanted to read while riding in the carriage. The girl decided to sit down at the table to start reading the book in complete silence, which helped her to concentrate even more. The cute heroine, who wanted to know more and more every day, was already immersed in the fascinating reading of the book. Time passed, and Oveta even stopped noticing how quickly time flew by. It stopped being important to her because being completely immersed in the stories of the book made her forget about everything else. Because of the realization that she had lost the passage of time just because of a fascinating book, the girl looked away, if only for a moment distracted from the book that was interesting to her, which was helping her to become a real professional in law. However, no matter how deep the girl's thoughts were, she couldn't help but notice a strange figure in front of her, which she immediately looked at. It turned out to be Hen, who wasn't so busy after all if he had decided to visit her. Oveta looked at him with mild amazement. Holding the book she'd been reading before, she continued to stare at her acquaintance in surprise, calling him by name and as if asking why he was here at this particular time. But the boy continued to look at his acquaintance as if he expected more words from her. He had his usual sly smile on his face when Ovetta asked him again what he was doing here and why he was looking at her like that. Not wanting to even say anything, Hen decided to put his hands on the table in front of the heroine, only telling her that he had made time for her after all. Ovetta played along, reminding him that he was the busiest man in the entire empire. After that, Hen was interested in what Ovetta was reading in the library. He replied to the girl that he was a busy man, asking her if it was a collection of books. Realizing what the girl was reading, Hen decided to ask her if she had already read all the way through. The girl replied that she hadn't read anything yet, and then she asked Hen what time it was. Looking at the girl, Hen answered her that it was about 7 o'clock. Hearing this, the girl perked up, looking to the side and pinning the annoying boy down as to whether it was already 7 o'clock. The heroine realizes that she's likely to be very late at the library. It turns out the protagonist was looking at the window to determine a more accurate time by the sun. At that moment, the reddish light of the sun fell on her, which made Ovetta tell Hen that it was really 7 o'clock in the evening. The enthusiastic boy immediately stood up because he was excited about something. He told the heroine that they should already go to the prince and Ordo's house because dinner was about to be served. He even confessed to her that Ordo kept telling the cooks not to cook, saying it wasn't worth it for his insatiable sister. Ovetta was immediately angry with her brother. With a good mood, the couple decided to walk to the banquet hall, where Ordo and the prince were probably already there. Ovetta walked down the corridor, holding Hen's hand and asking him if he agreed with her brother's words. Hen replied with a wide smile that, of course, he did not support it. Hen led the girl down the hallway, making her step on the carpet with her red shoes. Hen admitted that he had only told Ordo that she had an appetite like a hungry elephant. Devilchka replied that in that case, he would be slapped on the cheek with such force as if he were about to be hit with his trunk. Hen did not hesitate to ask her if she would jump to his face at all. Soon all the guests, led by the prince, were seated at the table, where there was a lot of service as well as large dishes that were mostly meat. Ovetta sat in the middle, and on her sides were Ordo and Hen. However, no matter how interesting the books in the library were, Ovetta couldn't stop talking about how wonderful the dishes they had prepared for them as honored guests were. Hen and Ordo only looked at her with a kind of surprise and curiosity. Ovetta did not stop talking. She was telling the prince all the palette of her emotions that the delicious meals at his manor had brought her. Ordo only had to watch a little grudgingly as his sister behaved out of etiquette. The prince even laughed because of the protagonist's sincerity, gesturing with his hand and laughing, saying that he was truly grateful for her sincere emotions, and he hoped that she would like everything, since the cooks had prepared it all hastily this time. After sincere wishes from the prince himself, all the heroines started the meal. Ovetta decided to be the first to cut a piece off the steak so that she could taste it sooner. She liked the food at the manor even more than at home. The main character even turned to her brother and naively asked him why they were such rascals. While Hen, who was also listening to their conversation, asked Ovetta what was the matter, Ordo Govovorov that the usual outrages of the Gogo sister were beginning again. The girl said that they didn't invite her to the prince's manor on purpose so that she wouldn't taste the delicious food there. That's why they were scoundrels. With those words, Ovetta sold the steak, telling everyone that it was really delicious and they should share it, because she always shared something delicious with them. But Ordo still didn't like it. He tried to pretend that he was just eating, but sometimes he would whisper to his sister to act normal instead of saying literally everything that came to her mind in front of the very prince of the empire. Hen also had time to intervene in the conflict. He looked at Ordo with a smile and asked him not to scold his sister. Ovetta, feeling supported smilingly, asked Hen to tell Ordo anything to put him in his place. But the girl didn't even think that Hen would definitely bully her the same way Ordo did. The boy pointed his finger at Ovetta, telling the prince and everyone present that even though she was a piglet, she was very cute and ate a lot. Ovetta got even more angry at Hen and her brother, ordering everyone to shut their mouths. Just because of the words about the piglet, a real conflict broke out between Ovetta, Ordo, and Hen. The prince only had to look at all this with a sincere smile, rejoicing the fact that everyone did not hide their emotions in front of him and behave quite normally, even though he is an aristocrat. When it became dark enough outside, the guests realized that they should leave. Everyone gathered near the entrance of the manor to make their way to their carriages and go home as soon as possible. But there was still no way Ovetta could say goodbye to the prince. She was talking to him right beside the steps. Next to the protagonist was always Hen, who was doing something else this time, while the girl listened to the prince's sincere words that he wanted them to visit him in this estate as often as possible. Ovetta listened to him very carefully. The protagonist turned back, looking at Ordo and Hen, who were about to get into the carriage, while the prince kept looking at Ovetta, with a slight embarrassment, telling her thanks for the visit and confessing that he was glad to see new faces. Then the carriage with the guests finally began its journey to the house. Hen got into his own carriage, while Ordo and Ovetta were in their own as usual. The two horses slowly drove the beautiful, well-maintained carriage along the smooth road, getting farther and farther away from the prince's estate. Ordo seemed reluctant to speak to his sister after a series of uncomfortable events right in front of the prince. He remained silent, not saying a word or showing any emotion. But the protagonist, judging by her smile, was still overwhelmed with emotions of joy and fun for today. Ordo was greatly surprised when his sister looked at him with a wide smile and thanked him for something. He marveled at that because he didn't even think the heroine would thank him for something. However, leaning on his arm, he decided to look at his sister with a smile as well, asking her whether she wanted to thank him for the roast pork or for the sautéed vegetables she had enjoyed at the manor. A little shy, the protagonist still looked at her brother with a smile as well, telling him that she certainly thanked him for everything. What he had done for her today, because thanks to him, she could hardly ever forget this day. After saying that, the protagonist's brother abruptly made a serious face. He looked her in the eyes and said that they are now even, that is, those who are even. But Ovetta replied to Ordo that if he wanted, he could become a debtor again at any time. As she continued to talk to Ordo, Ovetta could not forget the divine flavor of the pork she had tasted at the prince's house. She remembered it to this day, telling her brother with a smile that it was the best dish she had ever eaten in her life. The main character would have continued to tell her brother in great taste of all the food from the prince's estate if she hadn't remembered something. She looked at Ordo and asked him if he and Hen had some volunteer work planned for tomorrow. Ordo only rubbed his eyes tiredly, asking his sister if the reason she was asking him was because she didn't want to see Hen anymore. Ovetta asked Ordo what Hen had to do with volunteering, and the boy told her that it was because Tona was very tight-lipped. The brother and sister continued to fight with each other on the way home. The next day, the protagonist was already on her feet to see something interesting for herself, and it happened. She saw freshly baked bread in front of her, which she looked at in surprise and then asked the baker how he had been able to make it. The baker himself turned out to be Hen, who was able to surprise the protagonist with his skills in baking different baked goods. He looked down at her, naively interjecting if she didn't believe that he would make something himself. In front of Ovetta was indeed fresh bread that had just been taken out of the oven. It glistened from its beauty on the table, and Ovetta kept silent, for her amazement prevented her from speaking. She could not admire it. The girl turned to Hen and asked him if he was baking bread for the first time. She could hear in her voice that she was jealous of him because he literally knows how to do everything. Hen replied to her that he did, but he kept asking her for the recipe so that he wouldn't make a mistake. Hen smiled at the young lady with a sly look and said that he had heard that those who bake well have beautiful children. The boy said that if that was true, he had talent. Ovetta laughed playfully, hiding her embarrassment. She looked at Hen and told him that she was genuinely happy for him and his future wife, but now he should continue baking bread for charity. After that, the girl turned back as if about to walk away from the boy. She continued to stare at him, realizing that he could literally do anything, something he constantly bragged about. Ovetta pictured him with a long nose because she assumed he was constantly lying to her. After a while, the boy was able to bake a new batch of bread, which he planned to give to charity. He looked at the result of his labors and kneaded his shoulders, telling his partner that they hurt a lot. It was also all this time, and the main character was helping Hen with the charity. She looked at him with a smile and told him that he was a great worker who deserved praise. She was kneading bread dough too, helping Hen bake more food for those in need. Hen was kneading his shoulders because they were sore after working so hard. He smiled and looked at the girl, asking her how she managed to bake so much bread once a year. Afterward, the boy said that she and her family were doing a good job too. The main character answered him with a smile, too. Looking at him with kind eyes and holding a deep plate of dough in her hands, she replied that it was all just for the good of the community. She also told him to hurry up and get dressed because he was on his way out. An hour after Para baked the bread, the protagonist's entire family was already on their way, as were the servants who rode the horses. Around the carriage that Hen, Ordo, and Ovetta were in, there were 4 other carriages that were moving alongside them. The family was also guarded by many guards on horses. Since the protagonist had been on the road for a long time, she was very tired in addition. More than half of her strength went into baking a lot of bread for the needy. Because of this, the girl began to feel herself gradually falling asleep. However, she was immediately awakened when she realized that she was about to fall asleep because she was not allowed to fall asleep. She looked at Ordo and Hen sitting in front of her, thinking about the fact that she seemed to have dozed off due to baking bread. The girl was surprised by what she noticed in front of her. It turned out that Hen and Ordo also had little energy and leaned against each other out of fatigue, falling asleep like that. The protagonist immediately asked herself what that beautiful view was. It made her smile. She giggled quietly in order not to wake any of them up, while thinking about how funny it would be when one of them woke up and realized how they had been sleeping the whole time. That was what made her smile. After that, the girl felt bored sitting in the carriage where those she could talk to were sweetly sleeping, so she turned back, pulled back the curtain, and turned to the coachman named Twablin, making a request of him. The sweet girl asked Twablin, who was holding the wagon, if they had a long way to go. The coachman replied that he was just about to take a break in the forest, so their journey would not be long. But the girl kept looking at him with a smile, as if she was going to tease him. She kept looking at him while in the carriage and looking out of the window. Ovetta asked the coachman if she could climb over to him and sit next to him, but the angry carriage driver replied that it was strictly forbidden. The coachman named Twablin answered her that he had been exercising a lot lately, which made him look like a bear in size, so there was not enough room for them. Ovetta realized that this was a pathetic excuse for her not to leave the carriage. The girl then made as cute a look and voice as possible, continuing to look at Twablin and asking him not to be angry anymore for the prank she pulled on him. The fact was that the main character had recently managed to put a frog in his pocket, and so Twablin now didn't even want to talk to the young lady. Ovetta continued to make herself look cute in order for Twablin to let her in after all. He lowered his head and told the protagonist not to point at him later as the culprit when her parents start scolding her for sitting in the wrong seat. Out of joy, the protagonist even clenched her palm into a fist because she had gotten her way. She blushed with happiness, telling the coachman that she was very pleased with his kindness and helpfulness, adding that she would never forget his mercy. However, it was only when Ovette turned back that she saw what her brother appeared to be already awake. He looked at her with some displeasure, telling her to be quiet as he was reading. This made Ovetta laugh so much that she spat the air out of her mouth, trying not to wake the sleeping hen. When the carriage stopped for a short break and the horses were standing, the girl decided to get out of it, whereupon she wanted to jump into the coachman's seat, leaning against the carriage and intending to do so. But she did not think that someone would now come up to her and reveal her secret intention. The protagonist had already sat down next to the coachman, about to enjoy the open house to the forest, but then her father, who was riding a brown horse, approached her. He looked at Ovetta and immediately asked her why she wasn't in the carriage. Ovetta turned to her father with a smile, wanting to make a good impression as she didn't want to be scolded. Fixing her hair behind her ear, she answered him by saying that she had a strong desire to ride the carriage with fresh air. That's why she had moved. But Papa did not scold her for not following Ovetta's norms of etiquette for aristocrats. He only looked at her with a smile, warning her not to catch cold. The girl replied to him that she would definitely see to it. After that, the father of the protagonist left, and the girl began to tell the coachman, who sat beside her, all sorts of stories. Twablin was pleased to listen to them, so he looked at the heroine of the story with a slight smile on his face. Ovetta didn't have to wait long, because soon the servants loudly proclaimed to all the aristocrats that they had finally arrived in Altamar. Some of the servants got off their horses because they had already arrived at their destination. The protagonist was very happy about this. She had a lot of kindness in her heart, which made her want to distribute bread to everyone in need as soon as possible. Therefore, she looked at the place with a smile and joy on her face. However, the emotion of joy quickly disappeared from the girl's face as she looked at everything and realized that she had in no way expected to see what she was now observing in front of her. Because of this, her face expressed obvious surprise and even shock. The thing is that the girl saw a bunch of people in front of her who were also surprised at their arrival. They were all looking at the aristocrats, expecting them to help them. Ovetta was quite shocked by this as well. The girl looked at the very large number of homeless people who were waiting for her help. Ovetta, however, could not accept the fact that there were many more people who needed help than she had originally thought. This is what the young lady was surprised by. All the emotions of the protagonist were written on her face. She looked at each homeless person with exasperation and pain in her heart, but her father, who also looked at them, Javon, was more serious about it. He didn't give in to emotion. Ovetta wanted to say something about the village, which shocked her greatly, but she couldn't, because it was as if she was wrapped up in an intense fear for every single person who was in such a bad situation that they were forced to receive bread from the aristocrats. Because of this, the girl looked fearfully at the whole picture of what was happening. Meanwhile, the tinker girl's father was about to fulfill his duties. He approached one local closer, after which he told him that he was very grateful for the visit of the Alphon family. Ovetta's father replied that he didn't need any thanks as it was their duty. He also said that the situation was much sadder than they had realized. The protagonist herself marveled at the number of people who were obviously very hungry and in need of help. The heroine's mom was also standing next to her looking at the impoverished. The heroine admitted to her that there were indeed a lot of people, but the girl's sad thoughts were interrupted by her mother, who came up to her and said that it was not terrible for them because they were already prepared for it. She then told her daughter that today she was becoming the eldest, to which Ovetta replied that she would obey her. Also, one servant decided not to leave alone those who were still sleeping in the carriage because they were tired. He knocked hard on the carriage several times, shouting to Hen and Ordo to wake up and get up soon. This caused the boys to wake up. They both raised their heads, not realizing what was going on. Ordo even had a drop of saliva dangling from his mouth, which told them that he had been sleeping very soundly all this time. The boys were slightly startled, but quickly realized that they had already arrived. Since the protagonist's mother had told her that she would be in charge today, Ovetta immediately decided to command everyone, including the crowd of hungry people who wanted bread. Ovetta shouted for everyone to line up to get bread while Ordo and Hen stood beside her, eager to help her. The protagonist also thought about the health of all those who wished to receive the bread. She called out that those who needed medical attention could go to the tent next to her after they received their portion of rations. The girl's command surprised Hen greatly, but he didn't give any sign of it, continuing to stand next to Ovetta and watch how she loudly announced all the most important news to the humans. Then he decided to ask her directly how he could help, and the heroine immediately turned to him. Without thinking for a long time, the protagonist decided to give Hen a stack of blank papers, which Hen immediately took. She told him to fill out every single sheet. Hen was surprised at the very reason why the girl gave him the paper. He stared at her in surprise as she explained that he needed to record all of the patient's symptoms so that the doctor wouldn't have to question each one himself. Ovetta said he had better handwriting than she did, so it should go well. It turns out the compliment from the girl made Hen a little embarrassed. He turned away from her and coughed a little, feeling embarrassed while Ovetta laughed at it. Soon they needed to distribute all the bread that was on the table that they had baked earlier. Hen decided to get right down to his work. The first thing he did was to approach those closest to him, starting to ask them about their health and possible problems. All this was watched by the protagonist, who was only happy about it. Soon the pair began to work according to a simple, previously devised scheme. Ovetta handed out a loaf of bread to each person, and Hen stood nearby and asked each person about the state of health. Soon the hero's efforts picked up a rapid pace. Occasionally the girl looked at Hen and asked him if he was still tired, while the boy never took his eyes off the lists, for his work had made him immerse himself in everyone's problems as if he were a doctor. This time the boy turned to Ovetta and replied with a smile to her that he was tired just a little bit, whereupon he asked her to stretch his shoulders. Ovetta replied him with the same smile, saying that he was a real hard worker, to which the boy said that she had better not argue on this day as he was a real hard worker. However, the protagonist did get behind Hen, starting to tap on his shoulders, giving them a good massage. She did this with words about how he deserved it today, after all, and Hen told her that he was pleasantly surprised by her diversity in character. The boy's words hit Ovetta hard, causing her to deliberately put her hand on him. Hen told her that her diversity of character was more frightening than amusing, and he even asked her if she had been switched by accident. Ovetta answered him with a smile, saying that he was a pest. The couple continued to fool around, thinking about the fact that no one could see them. They jokingly slapped their bodies while Ovetta's father and mother watched them. Hen and the protagonist didn't even notice how close they had become, but the girl's parents, on the contrary, observed it perfectly. They had smiles on their faces as they looked at their daughter, who was spoiling herself with Hen in the distance. Ovetta's mother told her husband that she had worried for a long time that their daughter might behave inappropriately with Hen, but that turned out not to be the case. Marquis responded to his wife by saying that they were even bothering them a little. Ovetta's mother continued to look at Hen and her daughter with a smile, telling the Marquis that she was very pleased to see Ovetta next to a good boy like Hen. There were even blushes appearing on her face from the beautiful feelings. However, the Marquis was distracted from observing Ovetta and Hen by a servant, who loudly told him that a certain carriage had arrived. The Marquis immediately turned around, asking the servant what he meant and what kind of wagon had arrived at their place. The servant immediately told the Marquis that the wagon had the emblem of the ducal family on it. Everyone looked at this emblem, realizing that it was a wagon from the Hen family, who had suddenly surprised everyone with their visit. But what surprised people more was what was inside it. People were able to easily open the wagon, and then began to take out many useful goods that were very much there. They found all sorts of boxes with many useful things in them, including bread. The Marquis and the Marquise would have continued to stare in surprise at the wagon that had suddenly arrived to them, if it were not for Yen, who did not point at it with his hand, and said loudly that at last it had arrived here. The Marquis and the Marquess immediately turned toward him. Hen looked at Ovetta's father and mother with a smile, telling them it was a wagon from his father who wanted to make amends for his unwanted son in assisting in such an important cause as helping the hungry and sick. The Marquis looked at the boy and said that his words were utter nonsense because he, as an assistant, came in very handy for them. The whole situation made the Marquis look at Hen with a smile. The main character noticed how much Hen changed in his face when he spoke to her parents. He suddenly became serious, smiling and polite, from which Ovetta looked at him and did not understand why he suddenly decided to build a real aristocrat. The girl decided to stroke his head, asking him if he had decided to play Archduke right in front of her parents, while gently stroking him on the head like a pet that had started to behave and not to misbehave. But the boy only smiled widely and slyly. He continued to look at Ovetta, confessing to her that he was very pleased. The girl continued to stroke his hair, a little surprised at this. The girl not only didn't stop, but laughed because of Hen, asking him if she should stop if it made him feel good. Folding his arms, Hen replied that she could keep doing it, also occasionally stroking his hair. The boy decided to interrupt the fun by telling Ovetta that it was only because of today that he was able to realize that helping others was a very important thing to do, and he was very pleased to distribute Ovetta's labors to those in need. He blushed a little, admitting this to the girl. He even wanted to keep talking, apparently wanting to thank Ovetta or tell her something even more important, but the girl embarrassed him by constantly asking if he wanted to tell her something else. Eventually, the boy told the protagonist that he didn't actually want to tell her anything, while folding his arms and smiling in a way that made it immediately obvious that he was lying. Ovetta immediately yelled at him with a smile, saying that there should be no secrets between them, so he should tell her everything he thought. Hen only turned away from her and said he wouldn't do it because he was ashamed, but the protagonist didn't even plan on getting behind him. She ran after him, telling him that she would follow him around just so he would tell her what he was thinking. Ovetta continued to chase after the boy, not realizing that he wanted to tell her that his day was wonderful, not just because he helped those in need, but because she was always there for him. This caused the boy to blush, and Ovetta kept talking to him, not realizing what was wrong. But no matter how much the protagonist wanted to get her hands on Hen, she couldn't forget about the people who needed help. She looked at all of them, realizing that there were still a lot of them, and she was letting herself fool around with Hen. This made the smile on the girl's face disappear, and she began to think about going back to work and helping her parents. However, when she looked at the people in need of help, her mother told her that they would manage on their own, after which she recommended her daughter to rest. An overjoyed Ovetta told her mom that she could help them again, but the Marquis replied that it was not worth it because she had already done a lot for them that day, which was the reason why she was asking K.E. to rest. In the end, the protagonist decided to sit on the grass right next to Hen, who glanced over at her at moments and watched as she fell on the grass while covering her gogs like a true lady. Hen continued to stare in surprise at the lady, who was now not paying much attention to the fact that she was now not disgusted to be with Hen, whom she had previously considered an impertinent man. The girl at this time was telling him that they had done a great job. The boy looked at her with a smile and joy, asking if she would now call him selfish. Ovetta replied that she would no longer respond to him with that word, but she would no longer call him humble either. At that moment, Hen realized that he still wanted to tell her that she had brightened his day better than anything. Because of that, he looked at her with obvious thoughts about something as silence fell between them. And the protagonist kept smiling at him all the time, as if she was always expecting to hear new jokes from him so she could answer him back later. But when she smiled, Hen only called her name seriously to say something important. The boy hesitated to tell her everything he was thinking about because there was no way he could muster up the courage to do so. He kept looking at her even more intently while Ovetta waited for him to say what he wanted to say. When the protagonist realized that Hen wasn't going to say anything to her after calling her by name, she bluntly told him that he was kind of weird today because he kept calling her and then just kept quiet. Gradually, Hen blushed more and more. Hen decided not to tell the girl what he truly wanted to tell her. Instead, deciding to change the subject, he asked Ovetta if it was too crowded for her to be anywhere, because she seemed to be getting very big lately. Ovetta chuckled at the boy's words, telling him that he was about to get to his wits' end. For a long time, the pair sat under a tree talking about something that was slowly bringing them closer together. Suddenly, the main character looked at the people who were walking around and realized that everyone was already finished, which she told Hen, also telling him that they should go now. After that, after hinting to the boy that they should be heading back, Ovetta held out her hand to him, asking if he would help her stand up. Of course, Hen couldn't refuse her, and so he did it in his own manner. Helping the protagonist to stand up, Hen, laughing, told her that the pig, that is, she, could no longer get up because of her favorite food that she was always eating. Ovetta got up from the grass and told him that piglets bite very badly. Soon, the main character's family, her friends, and herself were already in the carriage, while her mother and father stood near the empty carriage and accepted words of gratitude from a simple man who had received their medical care, bread, and a lot of other food. The man who was saying words of thanks to them was clearly happy that the aristocrats helped the commoners because he was smiling all the time. There were also smiling people around, telling the Marquis and Marquess to thank Hen, who had also tried a lot for them. With their silence, the couple said that they would definitely fulfill the commoner's request. Then he smiled with happiness as he listened to the words of the Marquis and his wife that they looked forward to seeing the goods from their village at their town. Selyanin replied that he was madly grateful to them. The main character was also in a good mood because feelings of justice, kindness, and happiness overflowed her soul. She was proud of everyone and of herself in particular because on this day they helped those who really needed help. After a while, the carriage of the main character, Hen and Ordo, started its journey home, leaving people with bread, food, medicine, and good impressions. The girl was also happy that, as an aristocrat, she was able to help the troubles, rather than being a simple but significant figure in secular society. The carriage was wobbly from the rough road, which made Ovetta and Hen feel sleepy. The girl rested her head on Hen's shoulder, who sat next to her and also leaned his head in her direction from fatigue. Also in the carriage was Ordo, who had his head down from sleepiness and fatigue. But as soon as he noticed the way in which Hen had drawn close to his sister, his sleep was instantly removed. He looked at them very indignantly, not understanding how Hen could allow himself to do such a thing, even in front of him. Ordo, very angry at Hen, decided to kick the boy on the leg, and Hen woke up abruptly, also looking at Ordo, not understanding what was the matter. Ovetta still continued to sleep quietly, not waking up from the noise. He already indignantly wanted to ask the protagonist's brother what he didn't like and what was wrong, but he soon realized that he had answered his own question. She looked at the drinking Ovetta and realized that she was leaning her head on his shoulder, which meant that she now trusted him and treated him as a close friend. This alone made Hen blush so red that he began to look like a red rose. He looked at the girl, who clearly cared about him, and realized that now they were not just enemies or friends, but perhaps the best mentors for each other. The boy decided not to wake the protagonist. On the contrary, he decided not to interrupt her sleep so that she would enjoy the peace and gain strength after a long, hard day. He also stroked her hair a little because he also wanted to make her feel good, because he knows that he always gets a little pleasure from it. He also put his head on the top of her head so that he could drive home in peace too. He too felt tired after an exhausted day, but the fact that Ovetta had unknowingly gotten closer to him kept Hen at ease. There was a slight pinkness on his face because he was embarrassed. Gradually, time passed very quickly. Month after month flew by. Hen and Ovetta gradually grew closer, and one day they were sitting together at the table. Ovetta was eating pieces of cake, and Hen was reading a book. Ovetta decided to break the silence by asking Hen if he would go to the square tomorrow. Hen distracted himself from the book with a sly smile and replied to the protagonist that there was nothing else for him to do but to be torn apart by the crowd, because that, according to the boy, was better than putting up with the protagonist's whining. The girl continued to drink her tea and smile at Hen, thinking about what a scoundrel he was. She wanted to teach him a lesson, and she wanted to do it in the same style as Hen. In order to teach him a stronger and wittier lesson, she sipped her tea, thinking about the fact that she had always gone to the square with him every year. She asked herself if she could go with someone else this time. The girl then told Hen with a playful arrogance that in that case she would go to the square with someone else because she did not want to impose on him, and, according to the girl, he himself was not eager to go with her. An indignant Hen told Ovetta that she has no friends but him. Ovetta laughed because the guy really believed that she didn't have any friends except him. Holding the cup in her hand, she giggled evilly as she replied to the boy that she actually had a brother, Ordo, and Garland. The main character continued to play while Hen grew increasingly nervous just because Ovetta intended to go out with someone else, but not him. He sat sweating on the chair while Ovetta told him she was going to go out with Garland, whom she hadn't seen in a while. She had even asked Ellie's maid to bring paper to write him a letter. The girl was already calling for the maid, but suddenly Hen got up from his seat, shouting at the heroine not to write to him because they would go to the square together. Even though Ovetta was playing around, she still made Hen walk with her, knowing that he didn't tolerate others around her. Hen looked at Ovetta as if she had made him worry even more. There was a slight blush on the boy's face because he was actually embarrassed to tell Ovetta the fact that he really didn't like outsiders around her. But Ovetta looked at Hen with obvious slight surprise at the fact that the boy had so abruptly changed his mind and made a different decision, and he did it as if he was pissed off just by the mere talk of having someone else around her. But Hen had his own reasons why he didn't want to let Ovetta into the square with someone else. He looked nervously at the girl, remembering that the Snowflake Festival was coming up and he couldn't let her go to it with someone else. The boy remembered the Snowflake Festival for a reason. He imagined Ovetta and himself under the lanterns, remembering the legend that if they passed under them, they would stay together forever. It's a tale that goes around among the locals, and almost everyone believes it. Returning to the present, Hen realized that he shouldn't have answered Ovetta so harshly. He pressed his lip in embarrassment, realizing that once again he had failed to contain his emotions and had given in to anger instead of a calm response. Ovetta decided to calm the nervous boy down by waving her hand at him and telling him a little fearfully that of course they would go to the party together since she had no one else to go with. The girl said this only to reassure her friend. At the end, the protagonist decided to get up from her seat, in a kindly way, post-moroving on the boy. She told him that she would wait for him in the square tomorrow so that they could enjoy the festival together. Ovetta's words made Hen blush even more. He did not hesitate to smile in her face, showing his joy. In addition, the redness on his cheeks didn't even disappear, but only became bigger and more intense. After the girl sat down, Hen coughed a little and, like a true aristocrat, told her that since the festival would be crowded in the morning and they shouldn't take two carriages, he would pick her up to go together, sensing that their conversation was coming to an end. The heroine stood up from the red couch, also coughing a little from the fleeting embarrassment. She quietly agreed with his decision, saying that in that case, they would meet here tomorrow. Hen had already turned around because he planned to leave, but Oveda, who apparently didn't want him to leave, decided to ask him with a smile if he wanted to stay for lunch. Turning to the girl, Hen replied that he would not eat anything from her because his dad had forbidden him to steal food from her house. Oveda laughed a little, saying afterward that in that case she would come to him and eat everything he had. But Hen, who did not even think that Oveda was joking, turned to her and asked her in joy when she planned to come and visit him. There was genuine joy on his face, as if he had wanted to for a long time. The main character laughed because of Hen's reaction, while he pretended that he didn't want her to visit at all. He embarrassingly said that what he meant was that he needed to be prepared for it, because Oveda would definitely leave his family without food. After that, the protagonist decided to push the boy towards the exit because she was starting to feel like he was already lingering here for too long. She would do this with words about how he needed to hurry up and go because she wouldn't have time to write a letter to that boy named Garland, and Hen would turn to her and tell her not to write to him under any circumstances. The kids kept joking around until Hen went to his house. The next day, the protagonist was already being groomed for the festival, so that just by her appearance alone, everyone around her knew that she was an aristocrat. Ellie did Oveda's hair, and when she was done, she asked the girl to look at herself in the mirror and evaluate her stylist skills. Ellie continued to fix Oveda's hair while she told her that she was definitely the most beautiful in the world now, and all the guys would definitely be hers. This made the maid laugh cutely. Although the words of the main character of the story made Ellie smile, she still decided to tell her that she didn't need to overdo it, but rather be realistic and look at things with a sober eye. All this Ellie said with a smile. Oveda turned to the maid and laughingly asked her why she thought that, since she herself kept telling her that she was the most beautiful in the world. Ellie continued to laugh next to Oveda and insist on her point. Oveda was wearing pink slippers and Ellie was in her usual uniform. They both stood close to each other talking about being objective in this world. Afterward, Ellie asked the girl if she would go in the dress she chose last time. The heroine answered in the affirmative. Time was passing, and Oveda was still dressing up when Hen was already standing in the hallway, silently waiting for her appearance. He folded his arms and stood in the middle of the empty corridor, which spoke of his confidence and status as an archduke. The boy had already asked himself why his friend was taking so long to dress up, but it was at this point that he heard quiet footsteps behind him. It was Oveda, so Hen immediately turned around to look at her image. And before him appeared a young lady of extraordinary beauty who was dressed in a modest but exquisite dress of blue colors, and her neck was adorned with a necklace with a single stone. Oveda told Hen with a smile that it wasn't her taking so long to get ready, but he had arrived early. Just the image of her friend made Hen blush. He turned away from her, covering his flushed face with his hand so she wouldn't notice his embarrassment. The boy told the heroine that it wasn't the month of May to dress so openly. Oveda replied that she knew that, so she wore a winter dress and now the cold was nothing to her. To hide from the main character that he liked her image a lot, the boy turned away from her and said that he did not like her dress much. The girl stood next to him and asked him what he said since she didn't hear anything. Then Hen held out his hand to her and said with a smile that his words didn't matter much. After that, he suggested that the heroine should head out, because at this pace they could easily be late and miss everything. The girl smiled at the young gentleman's behavior. She looked at him as if she was showing him her trust and good attitude, and with that look she extended her hand to him. After a little while, the heroes got to the long-awaited festival. There were those lights that emitted a magical golden light, and there was also a large number of stores and stalls that sold a lot of interesting things. It was to such a place that Hen and Ovette arrived, watching everyone. The boy was telling Ovetta not to get lost as she was very small and weak. The couple was walking down the street and wanted to joke about each other all the way. They laughed at every word while Ovetta answered him that if he did lose her, he would have to see everything from up high and then he would definitely find her. But the couple didn't even notice the fact that only Hen was being looked at by a lot of girls who whispered that he was a real nerd. When the main character stepped back, Hen was immediately accosted by some madam. She threw herself at him with a fan, pretending that for some reason she felt very bad. Hen was shocked by her, and Ovetta was as well, because she realized she was playing. Ovetta looked at the very same girl with anger, telling herself that she will never believe in her life that this madam didn't purposely decide to fall right on top of Hen. She knows that many girls are crazy about Hen, but the girl continued to enjoy the festival, hoping that all the extra people would get away from her and from Hen. She looked around and smiled, touching someone's clothes and telling supposedly Hen to go somewhere and eat. However, when the protagonist turned to the person she was touching, thinking it was Hen, she realized it was far from him. She saw the most ordinary, unfamiliar man in front of her, looking at her while she frightened an awkward moment by apologizing to him for disturbing his peace. After apologizing, Ovetta thought that the stranger would quickly get away from her, and so she decided to twist her head around again and search for Hen with her gaze, not realizing where he could have disappeared to and how she could have missed him so easily. The girl continued to look for Hen, but the stranger with whom she had mistaken him continued to look at her with obvious interest, as if she had caught his eye with her beauty. It was evident by the blush on his cheeks. The stranger decided to approach the heroine, whereupon he extended his hand to her and asked her if they could have dinner together. Ovetta turned to him and immediately told him that actually she didn't come alone, but the stranger didn't plan to lag behind. The man kept pestering Ovetta, reaching out to her and telling her that there didn't seem to be anyone around, and so they could have dinner just the two of them. The stranger liked Ovette so much that there was no way he wanted to miss the opportunity to meet a beauty like her. But it was as if Ovette was telling him with her hands not to even approach her. Ovette was already laughing at her discomfort. The guy continued to be near her, insisting on dinner, and Ovette laughed, hiding her anxiety and telling him that she could pay for herself. Besides, she was not very hungry. The stranger in front of Ovetta didn't stop, suggesting that she should at least eat somewhere, but at that moment a tall guy appeared behind the girl and put his hands on her shoulders and told her that she shouldn't have fallen behind him. The overjoyed Ovetta immediately turned to Hen, looking at him with such happiness, as if she had been waiting all this time just for him to appear. She was almost crying, telling her angry friend that he had finally found her. Everything around her seemed to glow with her happiness. Only then did the stranger realize that he should leave Ovetta with his offers of dinner. He was frightened by the dark figure behind Ovetta, which was Hen. The boy pierced the stranger with a look of silent rage while Ovetta told the commoner with a smile that he was the one she'd been waiting for. After the annoying stranger left, the pair walked down the street together. They talked about why they had lost each other. Hen kept asking Ovetta why she had suddenly decided to leave, and the girl told him that she had just decided that they needed to have dinner together. Hen asked her if she had only left because she smelled the food. Ovetta replied with a smile that she had. Hen and Ovetta strolled nicely through the park, savoring the taste of street food. Hen was, after all, fulfilling the whims of Ovetta, who could only get lost from smelling the food she liked in the other direction. They joked a lot and talked about a variety of topics. After the couple ate dinner, they walked down the street where there were a lot of people. They looked at the paintings that were on display for general viewing. Ovetta listened to the stories of different people, and Hen was constantly by her side. The girl would have continued to stroll and enjoy every moment with Hen if she hadn't noticed an ice cream stand in the distance. She thought about the fact that she wanted it badly, so she decided to say something about it. As she approached her friend, Ovetta looked at him with the cutest smile, causing Hen to ask her what was wrong. The girl made her desires known in a less than direct manner, informing him that they were selling ice cream there. Folding his arms, Hen told her a little indignantly that it was actually very cold outside. The girl leaned over to him and said with a wide smile that eating ice cream in the winter was very cool, and then Hen told her not to go anywhere because he would buy her ice cream, whereupon they meet on the steps of the store. The main character was already seeing her friend off, waving at him and telling him that if he didn't come back to her with ice cream, she would leave him with the first guy she saw. Hen also answered her with a smile, telling her not to ramble because he will definitely bring her what she wants. After that, the happy protagonist immediately sat down on the steps of the same store just as Hen told her. A smile didn't slip off her face because her mood was high. Many people passed by her, but only some of them noticed the beautiful protagonist, who smiled incomprehensibly. The girl was sitting on the steps of some store. Suddenly her smile disappeared from her face because she wondered whether she should have gone with Hen instead of staying here. She asked herself that question, not realizing which decision was more correct. Suddenly she sensed a man beside her, who had obviously gotten very close to her. She immediately turned to him because she thought that there were no people at the festival who could approach her except Hen. But that turned out not to be the case. She saw someone in front of her who she never expected to see at the festival. The smiling, white-haired prince she had recently visited was looking at her. She immediately addressed him, calling him His Majesty, not understanding what he wanted from her. Before the protagonist could say anything, the prince immediately put his index finger to his lips, hinting to be quieter. Oveta looked at him in surprise as he explained to her that he could now be called by the name Bethel. He also informed the girl that he had escaped from the event. Oveta immediately covered her lips with her hands, lest she accidentally say something unnecessary. This made Bethel smile, causing him to become completely confident that the girl wouldn't rat him out to anyone and tell him that he had escaped from somewhere. Bethel decided to take a seat on the steps next to the main character, asking her if she came with her brother. Oveta answered him with a smile that she came with Lord Hen. The prince immediately asked the girl if that meant he would be the third extra in this company. Oveta immediately started waving her hands in front of the prince, implying to him that it wasn't like that at all. She excitedly told him that their walk was not intimate and personal, so he could join them without any problems. This only made the prince smile. He looked at the girl and laughed, saying that she was a terrible liar. He was actually a little resentful that she addressed him formally this time, even though he had already told her to just call him Bethel. The prince also asked the girl he was interested in if she had lost interest in reading. Oveta didn't understand the question the first time, so she gave him a dubious look, asking Bethel what he meant. The prince, who had developed a slight blush on his cheek, told the protagonist that only a couple months ago she had been desperately raring to go to his library because she wanted to read almost every book in it, but now she was hardly ever there. Oveta realized that Bethel wanted to know the reason for this. Smiling at the prince, the girl said, laughing, that she was only not coming to see him because she had gotten too busy at the academy, after which she asked him if she could come see him the other day. At that moment, Oveta's only thought was to make sure that the prince would in no way think that she only wanted to go to the library because of him. But to the lady's surprise, the prince became even more talkative, unfolding his arms and telling her that he would do everything possible to ensure that only for her the doors to his library were always open. Oveta, looking at him, realized that this was too much. She continued to laugh quietly, hiding her embarrassment in front of the prince. She was embarrassed by the prince's persistence and talkativeness, even suggesting that she go somewhere else, talking about how sitting on the steps was cold. And at this rate, one could forget about the library. Suddenly, the prince decided to give the girl something precious and unusual. He held out to her something that looked like a gemstone. Oveta looked at the strange thing with wonder as Bethel told her to take it with her. The main character took a closer look at the stone and realized that it was the same jewel that was warming itself. It turns out that the prince was only talking about the cold in order to give her this stone, which is very expensive. The main character decided to accept the gift. She continued to hold the stone in her hands, feeling its warmth and thanking the prince for such a useful thing. She wanted to call him Prince again, but at the last moment she remembered that he himself had asked to be called Bethel, so that was how she addressed him. What she was really thinking was that this was all too much. The prince continued to be right in front of her as Oveta sat on the step. He was telling her that now he hoped that now she would have an excuse to visit her someday. He also told her not to take the gift personally because it was just a thing. Oveta told Bethel that she understood. At that moment, a lot of cheerful company passed by them. After that, Hen looked at Oveta seriously and asked her where is the hen she told him about, because supposedly he should have come to her by now. The protagonist waved her hands again, telling the prince not to worry so much about it, because her friend had only been away from her for a short while, so he should be here soon. Bethel said he was pleased to hear that, but the prince apparently already had to go. He bowed slightly to the lady, giving her respect and telling Ovette with a smile that he would be waiting for her with a visit to the library. The heroine looked at him like that, as if every word he said was a genuine surprise to her. After that, Ovette could only watch the prince walk away from the nod aside. She wondered why the prince had decided he wanted to see her more often. Many assumptions popped up in her head, because of which she could not find the right answer to her own question. But the girl's thoughts were already unstoppable. She, sitting on the steps, imagined herself with a crown on her head, almost crowned princess, realizing that this would be a very good outcome for her, and Bethel would probably be pleased to have a wife from the same social circles as him. Then from her own strange thoughts, Ovetta laughed out loud. She scratched her head, asking herself what she had just thought. She told herself that becoming a crowned princess was simply unthinkable and unrealistic for her. It was like a dream. The girl was thinking too hard about her possible future, because she didn't even notice the arrival of Hen, who was already holding an ice cream. He looked at her puzzled, asking what she was thinking about. The boy held out her ice cream to Ovetta while she asked him why it took him so long to buy the deliciousness. Hen replied that the line for the ice cream was very long. That's why it took him so long. Ovetta couldn't wait to taste the ice cream she wanted from the beginning, so she licked it for the first time with a blush on her cheeks and a smile, expecting to taste the wonderful, cooling, and unique flavor of the sweetness. However, the protagonist's expectations were interrupted by a sharp, unexpected, and severe toothache that came from biting into the ice cream too hard, causing her tooth to curl. Hen couldn't help but notice it. The guy told the heroine that he thought it would happen to her, so he took this with him. Hen handed the girl a glass with a hot drink for her to take a sip so that her toothache from the cold would subside. The girl did just as Hen told her. She felt real relief afterward, even shivering a little from it. Gradually, she warmed up from the hot drink, sighing at the pleasant sensations. However, the heroine didn't dwell only on the drink. She looked again at the ice cream, which she was very eager to try again. She wasn't even embarrassed by the fact that at this time, her ice cream was being held by Hen, who was also looking at her, not understanding what she wanted to do. Hen was greatly appeased by what his friend did after that. She decided to taste her ice cream, enjoying the flavor of it, not even paying attention to the fact that Hen was holding it in his hand. This surprised the boy so much that he immediately blushed. His whole face turned red because Ovetta's actions immediately made him embarrassed. From the looks of it, they definitely seemed like a couple, the boy thought. Still feeling the redness on his cheeks due to the awkward moment and the slight romance, he decided to ask Ovetta what she was doing. The girl answered logically, saying that she was eating ice cream. Hen then clarified with her, asking why she wasn't picking it up. Ovetta replied that she was fine as she was. Hen wasn't even going to calm down after the romantic moment. He was still blushing as he looked at Ovetta, who told him to give his hand because he got a little dirty. The heroine didn't even seem to notice or didn't really care much about it. That Hen was very embarrassed. The guy watched as Ovetta kindly wiped his palm clean of dirt with a napkin, while smiling so warmly and touchingly that her smile alone could drive Hen crazy. To him, she looked like an angel from heaven. Hen continued to stand in front of the heroine of the story while she herself sat on the step of the store. He indignantly told her that he himself could wipe the dirt off with a napkin, but Ovetta just told him to hold still. Finally, the boy couldn't take it anymore. He turned back sharply because he couldn't stand his friend's cuteness any longer. Hen was blushing more and more, trying to angrily tell the lady that they should already go. Ovetta behind him only wondered at his behavior, asking why so fast. The boy turned to his friend, asking her if she wanted to walk for a while longer. The girl, lowering her head, answered Hen that she was just sad because the festival was still in full swing with everyone around, having fun and celebrating. Hen then decided to extend his hand to Ovetta. Still insisting on his own, he responded to the young lady by explaining to her that they could still hang out at the festival next year, but right now they should get going. Ovetta realized that as aristocrats, they seriously needed to hurry home. The girl decided to take the boy's hand, whereupon Hen began to hold her palm firmly, starting to walk somewhere. He told her that he did this so that she wouldn't get lost again and walk towards the smell of delicious food. To Ovetta, his words only made her smile. Her smile makes the world around her brighter, calmer, happier, and more joyful. Ovetta thought to herself that she was very pleased to be near Hen, and his presence even calmed her down. That was the reason why the girl was smiling. She didn't even realize that at moments Hen was looking at her. From his face still did not disappear blush, because he could not help but admire the heroine, who constantly clung to him. Now he was only looking at her, and he didn't need everyone around him. The couple was walking down the street, not even realizing that above them were the very streetlights that could make them inseparable for life. It could be considered an ordinary coincidence. But it was at that moment that Ovetta thought about the fact that if she had to live with Hen for the rest of her life, she wouldn't mind it. The next day, as it turned out, there were more surprises prepared for the main character than there had been the previous day. The whole family sat around the table in the house while Ovetta was stunned and shouting to check with everyone if her brother had been proposed to. Ovetta looked at her parents with such displeasure, as if it was their fault that Ordo was popular with the girls. She asked them how this was possible while behind her stood Ordo, who looked at her as if asking if she had any problems. The protagonist was gnawing on the fabric with envy, telling everyone that her brother, a complete fool who practically never leaves the house, is swimming in offers from young ladies, and she is only gnawing on her elbows. At that moment, her father came up behind her, who, coughing with a smile, told his daughter that a letter had come to her as well. The girl decided to open it immediately, because she was eager to find out whether someone had called her to marry, or whether there was something equally interesting. After reading it, the girl realized that it was an invitation to a tea party. She immediately remembered herself in an empty room and with books, happily telling everyone that she had literally chained herself to loneliness by constantly studying at the academy and reading books. The girl waved her hands in front of her parents and told them that from today she was starting a new life. The protagonist was certainly happy that now she would devote her time to people and socializing instead of books and loneliness as it was before. Ovetta even lifted the letter up above her head as if it was a real escape from boredom for her. She joyfully proclaimed to her parents again that she was very happy that she was finally invited to some party where she would surely be able to make a lot of friends. However, the main character's joy quickly disappeared when she looked at the letter more seriously and asked everyone present what was the reason she had been invited to the party. Her father and brother were standing next to her at this time, looking at her and thinking that it was probably because she rarely appeared in public that she had been invited to the tea party. Slowly time passed, and so came the day after Ovetta found out that she would be attending the tea party. She was sitting at a table where there were lots of cakes and cheesecakes. Also sitting with her was Hen, who looked at it all and told her that she shouldn't have dragged it all from home. Ovetta only put her finger to her lips, grudgingly telling the boy that it was his favorite cake from the bakery on Monda Street after all. The reason the girl had brought him the gift was because she had decided to come to visit him for the first time, something Hen had long dreamed of doing. Hen was not going to take his friend's word for it. He turned back suddenly, as if looking at someone and asking what and who had done to the real Ovetta. At this time, Ovetta herself was looking at him with her arms folded, not realizing what play he was about to make. She looked at him with suspicion slyly, asking herself if he was being capricious even when she decided to treat him by bringing him his favorite cake. The heroine laughed quietly, like a villain from a movie. Ovetta decided to teach Hen a lesson and punish him for his strange behavior, since he didn't even thank her for the treat. She leaned on the couch, sighed, and told Hen that she knew he would continue to behave very strangely, as he had been doing for the past few days. An indignant and angry Hen asked the heroine what she meant. Hen looked at the girl unhappily, as if she was his mom scolding him for something. Ovetta wondered if he was going through puberty, but Hen kept asking the girl questions, not understanding what she wanted to tell him. Also unhappy about something, Ovetta decided to continue to keep on naively telling Hen her thoughts. She told him that it happens to everyone sooner or later, but in her opinion, he always acts like a naughty child. Ovetta nodded at all her words in order to appear more convincing. Hen became even more resentful of his friend's words. He looked at her with obvious shock, not understanding how she knew so much. He didn't like the fact that Ovetta was being clever, but when he thought seriously about puberty, he realized that she might be right. But the surprises for Hen didn't end there, because as it turns out, Ovetta decided to give him a cake for a reason. She showed him her index finger and told him that in exchange for this delicious cake, he would teach her the accepted manners at tea parties. Hen still continued to frown, realizing that he had just been cleverly tricked. He sat there frowning, looking like a dark cloud, and then Ovetta angrily ordered him not to sulk, but to get to work quickly, because she really needed to know tea party etiquette. The boy did tell and show Ovetta everything she wanted to know about tea party etiquette, which made it easy for her to learn all the new knowledge. After a while, she decided that she had to leave, and for that reason she was already standing in front of a lady, thanking her for a wonderful time and asking Lady Rehovim to invite her next time as well. It turned out the girl was only rehearsing her etiquette in front of Hen, as if talking to his mother. Hen listened to her attentively, and as if Lady Rehovim was responding to the heroine that he would definitely think about whether to invite her next time if she was such a gourmet. After that, playing his mom, he told the heroine not to linger here. The main character looked at the writing pen that Hen had fixed on her ear and asked him if it was forbidden to eat very much food when visiting. The boy replied with a smile that it was certainly not forbidden, after which he offered to let the heroine take her home because she had told him earlier that she wanted to go home early. Ovetta was already turning towards the exit to get into Hen's carriage, who deigned to provide it for her to get home. She bid him farewell, telling him that she would be sure to tell him how the tea ceremony went, and she also warned him that with the start of her new life she would have little time for him. Hen only sadly replied that he understood that perfectly. After a while, Hen was already watching his carriage, in which Ovetta was sitting. She was riding home without even realizing that the boy was watching her, standing on the canter. Gradually, the horses pulled the carriage farther and farther away from him and the castle, but Hen still kept his eyes on her, for there was not too much peace on his soul. He glanced at the departing carriage with the protagonist, realizing that he would have loved for her to stay with him a little longer, or come to see him more often. But the protagonist's quiet thoughts were interrupted by someone who crept up behind him and whispered words. Hen's mother moved closer to his ear and told him that if this was the Ovetta he was telling her about, then let her come here any time. Hen immediately turned to her and asked in shock what she meant. The boy's mom just folded her arms, sighed heavily, and told her son, Moll, she didn't think he was such a tightwad. She asked him what he himself thought she just meant. Son and mother continued to talk on the balcony on a variety of topics, as the dark carriage with Ovetta inside traveled its way. After a while, she did arrive at the whitewashed palace of the Alphonse family, which is considered her ancestral home. And a few days later, the protagonist was already at the tea ceremony to which she received an invitation earlier. In the luxurious and well-kept garden, there were tables where aristocrats were already sitting with old and young women, talking about what they like. The main character was also there, who had chosen an understated dress in white for the party, which was adorned with a large blue bow. The contrast with her hair color was perfect, making it easy to spot her. The girl curtsied, giving everyone her name and thus introducing herself to everyone. Most of the aristocrats immediately responded to the cute girl's words. Her two friends turned to her and also said that they were happy to welcome her to this wonderful celebration. They both smiled and were even embarrassed by Ovetta's presence. After that, Ovetta was able to walk a little further to the tables. She looked at all the guests, holding the fabric of her dress and not understanding why she was starting to worry a lot if yesterday, when she practiced her manners, she was calm. It was only as Ovetta began to look more closely at the faces of the guests present that she saw the one there, the one she clearly did not expect to see at the tea party in any way. On the face of Ovetta immediately appeared fear and excitement, because this person clearly does not like her. As it turned out, the girl was looking at another young lady with brown blonde hair and a purple dress who was still sitting at the table and did not notice Ovetta. The protagonist asked herself why it was Sophia Bertrina who was also here. Ovetta dislikes Sophia for a reason. She knows her as Hen's most flamboyant admirer who is head over heels in love with him. She has often followed them when the couple partied together. Hen would touch the heroine's head, telling her that she wouldn't grow at all if she didn't eat more. Ovetta also teased him back, unaware of the fact that a third extra was watching them. The mere presence of the main character next to Zen made Sophia so angry that she was willing to take more drastic action for his sake. She was jealous of Zen almost everyone, because he was very popular among the girls. However, the protagonist still decided not to back down and come closer to Sophia to sit at the table. She decided that all she needed to do was to be quiet and keep her head down so that Hen's admirer named Sophia wouldn't notice her and start confronting her, which is what she likes to do. It's like it's her hobby. After the heroine managed to quietly sit down at a vacant seat, she was immediately approached by a young aristocrat with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked at Ovetta and told her that she was very happy to see her at this event. The heroine remembered that this was Catherine Hartwell. Catherine then turned to the other guests to similarly show her gratitude for today's visit. Placing her hand on her chest, she told each one that she was honored to have such people at her party. Ovetta sat next to her and smiled out of politeness. Occasionally, Ovetta would also glance over at Sophia, who was sitting next to her. She thought about the fact that Catherine and Ordo often exchanged high-minded words at all sorts of banquets, and she hoped to learn a little more about it, but Ovetta had a but. The girl glared at Sophia, who seemed to be trying to drill Ovetta with her gaze. She kept her eyes on her, which made the protagonist of the story didn't realize, was she going to stare at her all evening, or should she leave? Ovetta turned away from Sophia again as a sly smile formed on her face. She remembered that she was just about to create a pleasant impression of herself using the tricks that Hen had suggested to her earlier. So Ovetta decided to take action. First of all, the main character imagined that she moved closer to the girl sitting next to her and told her that her beautiful eyes shone so brightly and luxuriously, as if they were a real diamond. The brunette looked a little embarrassed, thanking Ovette for the compliment with a smile. The protagonist decided not to pursue it. She just pictured it in her head, continuing to drink tea from a nice cup, and thinking that she'd better not get stuck in any incidents today, and it was best to be quiet and polite. At that moment, someone told Ovetta that she was supposedly not comfortable with today's meeting. Not surprisingly, that person was Sophia, who was also drinking tea. She glanced at Ovetta, telling her that she didn't seem to be enjoying the tea party much because she hadn't said a word since she sat down at the table. All the ladies at the table immediately fell silent as they listened to Ovetta and Sophia's conversation. They looked at them with surprised eyes while the protagonist answered Sophia that it was probably not her interest, but her experience, which she didn't have much of. Ovetta tried to explain to Sophia that she would like to learn from others how to behave at a tea party, and the reason she was silent was because she didn't want to make any mistakes. But Sophia interrupted her in the middle of the sentence, saying that it was understandable because she had been extremely busy with her studies lately, and she didn't care about social parties. Out of anger, the protagonist clutched her dress with her hands. She thought about how Sophia was even more rude and obnoxious than she had thought before. She thought about how she really wanted to teach her a lesson, but she didn't want to say anything too bad right in front of Catherine. The heroine turned away from Catherine, realizing that she does not want to see any sort of showdown and quarrel at her tea party. But the girl was so angry with Sophia that it was as if she was begging Seven to hold her so that she wouldn't lash out in anger. It seemed the girl had decided to employ Hen's tactics that he had told her about days earlier, lowering her head and blushing. Ovetta told everyone that she did spend a lot of time studying because it was very important to her. She also said that if they could help her learn table etiquette, she would be very grateful to them. The girl cited the outfits of the young ladies as an example, saying that they were all very beautiful, and against their background her dress seemed boring. Ovetta's words affected everyone who sat next to Nee. Catherine told her not to say such a thing because she, as well as her dress, looked beautiful. Next to Catherine was another lady who was nodding at every word her friend said. Catherine even smiled at Ovetta, telling her that she probably had something to tell them, and so they were all willing to listen to her. At that moment, Ovetta realized that her trick from Hen had worked, and everyone around her had actually become more affectionate, and the tension, the one Sophia had created, was quickly subsiding. Ovetta looked at Catherine with such admiration as if she saw an angel in the flesh in front of her. She thought so of her, because Catherine had not only a beautiful, gentle, and light appearance, but also a sweet, feminine character, which charmed Ovetta. For joy, the protagonist decided to tell everyone present that she was very grateful to them all for such kind words. Pointing at herself with her hand, A blushing Ovetta confessed to them that she even felt like she was in heaven for one moment when the young ladies showered her with compliments. The heroine decided to not just thank everyone for treating her kindly, but also to emphasize on Hen's reception. She decided to use it again to gain the company's trust and attention. Looking at the girl next to Catherine, whose name is Doda, Ovetta told her that her dark eyes glittered like diamonds. The sudden and cute compliment from Ovetta made everyone not only smile, but also laugh. The three young ladies laughed quietly at the table. As Ovetta looked at them and realized that her plan to capture the attention of the ladies had been successfully executed, sitting at the table, which had lots of sweets on it, all the ladies immediately decided to ask the heroine of the story how she got such manners and courtesy. Lady Doda told Ovetta that she knew she was just being polite, but she was still pleased to hear compliments from her. Sophia was watching all this, and she clearly didn't like the fact that Ovetta had gotten all of the young ladies' attention in just a few moments, leaving her with nothing. Because of this, Sophia seized angrily, angering the red-haired girl even more. Time passed, and gradually the teacups were getting empty, and the tea itself was running out in the teapots. Ovetta talked merrily with the group of young ladies about anything she could think of, happy that at last she had many friends, not just Hen. When evening came, it was clear to all that the tea party was coming to an end. The main character was already near her carriage to get into it and go home, but she was not let go by Catherine, who told her that she was very glad of her visit, and she hoped to see her again in her company. The girls looked at each other while Ovetta confessed to her new friend that she was afraid to say the wrong thing, as she had little experience in socializing. Ekaterina replied that it was nonsense and she did a great job. Catherine even confessed to the main character that it was only thanks to her that the ladies were constantly falling down laughing at today's tea party, and if it wasn't for her, it wouldn't have been as fun and funny for everyone. After that, Ovetta was on her way to her carriage, waving goodbye to Catherine and telling her that she would see her next time without fail. Catherine also waved to the girl, seeing her off with a glance. In a good mood, Ovetta was already lifting one leg to get into her carriage and drive home with a new baggage of pleasant memories and emotions. But she stopped for a moment when she heard someone behind her call out to her. It turns out that behind Ovetu was already Sophia, who was clearly displeased with something. She was literally ordering the heroine to stand still and not move, because her anger was clearly higher and stronger than any manners. Her angry and indignant eyes looked only at Ovetta. At this time, Ovetta realized that she would not be able to leave for her home in a good mood after all, happy for the fact that she was able to be talkative and pleasant without hurting Sophia's feelings. But that turned out not to be the case, because she was already behind her. The protagonist was already turning to the unpleasant lady, listening to her questions and outrage. Sophia grudgingly asked Ovetta if she thought she was untouchable for the sole reason of being intimately involved with Hen. Showing Ovetta her evil, big smile, Sophia decided to confess to her that her father and Hen's father had been close friends since they were children. Sophia also told Ovetta Mole, her father, will soon go to Count Rehovim for a visit. However, Sophia's words only made the protagonist laugh. She couldn't look her in the eye with laughter, so she looked away because she knew what was about to happen. But the girl's behavior only made Sophia even angrier. The protagonist assumed that right now she would yell at her about telling her father everything. Ovetta knows that Sophia very often does this when she does not like something, and because of this, it has become her main phrase in almost all conflicts. However, to Ovetta's own surprise, this was not the case. Because of this, she looked at her with empty eyes, continuing to wait for something and saying to herself, was that really all that the usually hysterical Sophia wanted to say to her? Sophia continued to look at Ovetta with that smile, as if she had already taught her a lesson, but in reality, Ovetta was thinking that the information about her father's close relationship with Hen's father was very useful to her. She even thanked Sophia in her mind for blabbing it to her. When Sophia fell silent, the heroine of the story realized that she wanted her opinion and voice. Ovetta lowered her head then, sighing heavily. As if she felt only heaviness because of Sophia, she spoke her opponent's name, about to say a few affectionate words to her. To Sophia's own surprise, Ovetta told her that if she had any grievances against her, she should say them directly instead of splashing her acid on everyone. Sophia was so shocked by the heroine's words that she looked at her with horror on her face. Ovetta turned around and turned her head away from Sophia, telling her that if her father was on such good terms with Hen's father, she should go and visit him and show him how disgusting she is to get the attention of Hen, whom she likes so much. Sophia resented the heroine's words even more. She blushed with anger like a red pepper, trying to call Ovetta a bad word, but the shock wouldn't even let her say a single word. Sophia was even more angry at the protagonist. Suddenly, the protagonist heard the coachman's voice behind her. He turned to Ovetta and, shouting, asked her if she was okay and what was going on. Ovetta realized that she had already lingered here too long. She needed to go home soon. While Sophia was almost shaking with anger at Ovetta, the heroine herself curtsied in front of her, saying also that she should forgive her since she had to go. After that, looking at the lady trembling with anger, Ovetta bid her farewell. Letting the heroine speak her mind, Sophia decided to point her finger at her, with a blush on her face shouting that she would regret her words and insolence, which she showed her. But Ovetta didn't care about that. The heroine of the story just looked at the one who threatened her and promised that she would teach her a lesson yet. Because of the shame, Sophia thought of nothing else but to run away from Ovetta somewhere far away, to never speak to her again. Ovetta looked at her and thought that most likely the rascal had already run to tell her father everything. She decided to tease her a little, waving her hands and repeating Sophia's words in a funnier manner, as if she would be on her knees in front of her asking for forgiveness. To Ovetta, Sophia's threats were simple, fleeting words. After that, the protagonist did get into her own carriage, which was waiting for her. She thought about the fact that she originally knew about Sophia's difficult and nasty character, but she could not even think that this girl would be so bitchy. A day after the incident happened, the protagonist was telling it all to Hen, the leader, on a bench in his palace. She was telling him that she had rendered what she wanted, after which Sophia herself decided to leave her. She continued to lie on the red bench. Holding the book in front of her, Ovetta continued to talk to Hen, confessing to him that at first she found it difficult to say even one word because she was shy, but then she overcame that threshold and was able to talk to the young ladies. Hen had been sitting all this time listening intently to all of Ovetta's stories. He was thinking about the fact that she had said that very compliment about diamonds to someone after all, thinking about the fact that it was a real platitude and boring. Ovetta would get up to look at Hen and sit down at the table normally. At that time, Hen answered her in a slightly gruff voice, saying that he was glad things had ended up better than he had originally thought. The heroine smilingly told him that she could hear the displeasure in his voice. Hen wanted to ask his friend about Lady Catherine, but he couldn't finish because he saw a carriage nearby that had a red, slightly nasty color. Hen immediately realized who it could be. The boy kept looking at the carriage that was passing by them. Ovetta noticed not only the red-colored carriage, but also Hen's strange reaction, causing her to ask him if it was Count Bertrand's carriage. The pair continued to watch the carriage, watching as the Count stepped out of it, holding someone's hand. Hen replied to the heroine, saying that her assumptions were correct, as it was Count Petzel of Bertrina, and he had not arrived alone, but with his entire daughter, who also stepped out of the carriage with a smile. Hen pictured his father with Count Petzel already beside him. The boy didn't understand why he didn't come alone, if it was just the two of them to discuss something private. Hen didn't understand why some other girl had come to see him. Meanwhile, Ovetta couldn't help but think of Sophia, who had promised her that she would tell her father everything. She remembered her character, realizing that she had taken her words about the visit as a challenge, which was why she had come to Hen's palace with her father. Looking at the boy, Ovetta asked Hen, should he not need to meet him as well if they had come to his house? Hen calmly replied that he would not do that as they were his father's guests, and if they did want to talk to him, then let them come to him themselves. Suddenly, Ovetta decided to get up from her seat, sighing and telling Hen that she should probably leave already. Hen looked at Ovetta in surprise, asking why she decided to leave so abruptly, to which she replied that he had guests and she didn't want to intrude with her presence. The boy tilted his head down slightly, covering himself with a light blush. He told Ovetta not to be in such a hurry, and then he asked for her permission to walk her out. The boy's words made the protagonist smile a lot, but she was still serious with him. She told him that it was okay, and he was obligated to stay here because his father might call him, and she didn't want to feel guilty for having all of Hen's attention turned only to her. Hen stood up as Ovetta walked down the road, daring her to walk her anyway, like a true gentleman. Ovetta smiled at him and was very sweet, looking at him and asking him if he remembered the boorish woman she had told him about earlier, who had sat next to her at the tea party. Hen replied that he remembered her, waiting to hear the answer from his friend. The pair looked at Count Petzel and his daughter, while Ovetta admitted to him with a smile that she was the same girl who had called her names to her face. Meanwhile, Sophia herself was acting very intelligent, as if she was not a bore at all, doing her best to be the best in front of her father. This whole situation only made Ovetta cringe at Sophia while she didn't even notice her. The heroine was pointing her finger and showing her tongue like a child who dislikes a certain person a bit. However, Hen was very serious. Everything around him seemed to grow darker as he took a closer look at Sophia and realized that this was the same girl who had recently shown Ovetta her unpleasant temper by threatening her to tell her father everything. As the sun was already reddening over the palace of Hen and his family, Count Rehoboam was the first to speak to the guests, telling Count Petzel that such a busy man had come to pay them a visit, and he was glad of it, but wanted to ask what had happened. Holding a cup of fragrant, expensive tea in his hands, Count Petzel replied to his interlocutor that there was nothing important or urgent about his visit, for he had simply decided to visit him after a long separation, especially since they had begun to see each other less often on business. But Earl Rehoboam had a good mood, thanks to which he did not succumb to his friend's sad words. He looked at him with a smile, saying that they never observed formalities in their conversation, so they shouldn't speak so formally. The words of an old friend made Count Petzel not only smile widely, but also laugh as sincerely as he could. He told Hen's father that he never changes, calling him Haydn.